Here we go. All right, great. Thanks, David. So I'm going to go back to my screen share. All right, perfect. All right, so the University of Rhode Island College of Environmental and Life Sciences Cooperative Extension is what this program falls under. URI is a land-grant university. It started in 1888 with the whole mission of providing science to local farmers in the community. URI is built on the ancient traditional lands of the Narragansett people. And I urge you to look at your community and where you're farming and find out whose land you're currently stewarding as well. So this program started actually in the University of Maine. When I graduated, I had previously talked to Dr. Brown in the field, as farming provides a lot of opportunity to do so, about how I wanted to connect veterans with farming because I found it so therapeutic to be gardening when I was going through some of my PTSD therapy years after I got out of the military. So Dr. Brown encouraged me to look at other programs in the region and see what they were doing, and I did. I reached out to a few programs, and UMaine got back to me. Colonel Ann Martin, she was in the Marine Corps. She was running this Boots to Bushels programs at UMaine, but she needed to step down for some family reasons. And she offered to pass along the remaining portion of her grant. So that portion of the grant is what's funding this 10 weeks of online classes. And it's what kind of started the program here at URI. We've received another grant from the same organization, a much larger grant that's going to help extend the program throughout the summer. And obviously, as a veteran, I wanted to help other veterans kind of going through the same transition from military to civilian life. But all of the material that we're gathering here is applicable to all beginning farmers. So we opened it up to include veterans, their spouses, and beginning farmers. This program, like I said, is funded through grants. The first section of grants came from under this award number that's posted here, and the next one will have a different award number, which I will share once I get it. But the grants are from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture and specifically the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Center. And so in order for me to fulfill the needs of the grant, I really need you to fill out the beginning survey, and there'll be an end survey, and I'll use that information to send back to USDA. It will allow me to fulfill the requirements of the grant and get that last little bit of money that they'll hold on to, but it will also allow me to apply for future grants, for future funding. So it's super important that you all take just 5 or 10 minutes and fill that out for me. A little bit about the program. It was originally 9 months, but obviously things got held up. The grant got held up for a little bit, so it's going to be an 8-month program. We are currently in what I'm calling phase 1, which is the weekly online seminars. That'll be from February to April. And then phase 2 is the farm tour section that we have 2 rounds of farm tours. There'll be a group of them in Rhode Island and a group of them in Maine. And I have already reached out to most of the people who are in the Maine cohort and given them the contact information to get on that Maine farm tour list. But if you would like to get on the Maine farm tour list, go ahead. You can plug your name into the chat and let me know, or even better, you can just email me and let me know that you're interested in the Maine farm tours, and we'll get you that contact information. This third phase, phase 3, is going to be from June to September. And it's It's going to be a 1 to 2 acre market garden at the URI campus, and we're going to have 10 workshops that you can come and get hands-on experience farming. Okay, so NERM, the organization that gave us the grant, has identified these 5 risk areas for farmers. They go production, marketing, financial, legal, and human risk. And we're going to cover a few topics from each of these 5 risk areas in the course. And this is, I can only see part of my screen, but this is the outcomes. Oop, and it went crazy. Great. There we go. I'm not going to read through all of these, but for example, for number 1, we're going to go over a lot of these topics within production risk. So crop planning, vegetable production, crop diversification, soil health, our ecosystem, seedling production methods, pest management, disease management, season extension. There's so many topics that we could go over, and there's even more. I had to stop adding things in. And we're going to go over Brightspace. Now, I think I need to stop sharing for a second so I can pull up this tab. 1 second. Do we have any questions so far? No? Okay. I don't see any hands or anything. Let's see. Hopefully you were able to get into Brightspace. I did see that some of you had logged in. I can see that on my end. Is there anybody having like a major problem getting into Brightspace? I'll take that as a no. No. You were not able to get into it, Eric. Okay. There could be yeah, if you could just yeah, Eric, if you could just send me a little email or letting me know that. I'm gonna write your name down now. There might have been a problem with how I entered in your email address or something like that, or your name. But let's go over Brightspace. I had this set up for 2 screens, so now I'm trying to smush it all into this one screen. Share screen. Pretty scary when it goes black on me. Doesn't seem to be working. Can you see the Brightspace page?
Yeah, I can see it.
You can. Okay, because I can't. It's a completely black screen for me. You're all gone now. All right, so I'm going to talk about Brightspace a little bit. There is, while I try to figure this, my screen's completely black. I can't see anybody. Hang on 1 second. There you are. Stop sharing. I'm not going to do that again because my screen went black and I don't know where you went. But let's see. Oh, sorry guys. Day 1. All right, so here's Brightspace. I got it up now. There is, on the right-hand side, there's a welcome tab where I can put up some announcements. The bottom right is a calendar with the pre-course evaluation link again, and then some assignments. And on the left-hand side, there are different folders. There's the course outline and the Zoom link, which will be there every week, so you can go in there and log in. And then an overview of risk management, which is what the course is based on. And then each of those 5 categories has its own tab. There's some additional resources like beekeeping and USDA information and some additional organizations that you might find useful. And this is where the recordings will be posted. I just wanted to go. So today we're going to go over stress a little bit later after I'm done with the broader outline. And so if you open up one of these tabs, there's lots of links. I just wanted to show you that sometimes you just really keep scrolling, and then sometimes these tabs will minimize, so you might need to open some things up in order to see all of the information provided. The other tab that we'll be using on Brightspace is this assignments tab. These assignments are strongly encouraged. It definitely will help you to process this information if you're thinking about it and applying it to your own vision of your business. They're not mandatory, but I really would like for you to try them. They're not that hard. It shouldn't take you more than like an hour or less to do each of these assignments. And that's pretty much all we'll be using in Brightspace. I'm going to go back to our slideshow.
Hey, just a quick question about that.
Sure. Yeah.
I was just looking at mine and it says I didn't submit the pre-course evaluation, but I did do that Google form.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah. I just put the link up there. It's not that advanced to show.
to feed through? Okay.
Yeah, to feed through. But
Gotcha.
so don't worry about that. Do you want me to fix that so that you don't have a ding on your account?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it had gone through.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So on Brightspace, and I believe I emailed this to you as well, there is a class schedule. It goes over all of the different topics in the instructors that will be providing the information. There's a couple of things I want to highlight though. So all of these weeks 1 through 4 will be online. There is an option on week 6, a total option. You do not have to do this, but we're going to be doing a labor movement workshop from Cynthia Flores. She's going to come to Rhode Island and provide this workshop. We're going to film it and we're going to put it online, so you don't need to come. But if you would like to come, we would love to have you here. I'm working on potentially doing a second workshop in Maine itself, where Cynthia will pick a location up there that's kind of central to you all. So if you're interested in that too, I think what I'll end up doing is just sending out a survey to see who's interested in coming to either of those options. Same deal on April 2nd. There's an in-person option to do the seedling production. We'll do it right here at URI on campus. There is not an option for Maine per se, but all the information will be recorded and posted and you can watch the recording. But if you'd like to come in and get your hands dirty, you can do that too. So I just want to make you aware of those 2 dates.
If I could say something, my
Sure.
local Grange is hosting Cynthia Flores for a workshop. So maybe if someone's up in central Maine, we could figure out them joining in for that.
Great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Let's talk offline about that.
Sounds good.
And I can reach out to Cynthia as well.
Cool.
Thanks. All right, so obviously there's going to be different resources depending upon which state you're in. I have done my best to look up sister resources in other states and posted them on Brightspace, and we'll mention them in class. A lot of these organizations are federal organizations as well across the country, so they'll be applicable. But if for some reason you can't find your sister organization in your state, just let me know and I will be happy to help assist you with the search. All right, so we just talked about phase one. Now we're going to talk about phase two, which is these farm tours. Here's the list of farm tours for Rhode Island. Roots Farm up in Tiverton, Brandon Family Farm in South Kingstown, North Kingstown. I'm not sure which line they're on. Pat's Pastured is Central Estate. West Farm Organics is in Westerly, and Wishingstone, I believe, is also in like the Bristol, Tiverton area. And then there's a list of farm tours in Maine. They have more options. They've been doing the program for a few years now. So you should have gotten an email. Within the email, you need to register for these classes. You don't have to be from Maine to go on these farm tours. If you're going to go on a trip there and you want to step in, you can definitely do that too. And they have a seed starting at the commercial scale workshop in March 26th. So if you're in Maine and you can't make it to ours, seed starting in Rhode Island, you could maybe make it to this seed starting instead. All right, so phase three is what we just got the grant for. So we're going to be making this large 1 to 2 acre market garden here at URI, and these are all of the workshops that we're going to hold every couple of weeks. You can come in and try out these different skills. And the class is going to be open to people who are participating in this program. We're going to also open it up to beginning farmers in the local community as well. All right, completion of certificate. You can, if you would like one, if it feels good for you, I can definitely make up some certificates. I can include phase one or phase one and phase two. If you want a certificate, I would like for you to watch all of the lectures or attend the lectures by the end of April. If you're in phase one and two, you will need to go to the 4 farm tours in Rhode Island or the farm tours in Maine. You'll need to complete all of the assigned readings and videos and surveys as well to get the certificate. Now, I did talk to Farm Credit East, and this certificate is something that you could slide into your application packet if you're looking at purchasing some farmland. It would just kind of show that you have some experience and that you have a vested interest in becoming a farmer. And with that, how are we doing on time? Wow, I talk a lot faster than when I'm practicing. So what I would recommend for everyone is to take a 10-minute break. Craig, are you ready to give your presentation just a little bit early?
Yeah, I'm working for you, whatever you need.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at 9:40 and then Craig can go into his presentation. And if you have any questions for me in the break, go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see you. And you can put the questions in the chat or raise your hands. I recommend getting up and stretching and walking around. We'll probably do 2 presentations of people and then we'll take another break after that. Thanks, Meredith. Who do you have there, Craig? That looks like a nice fluffy puppy. He's not listening. It's good to see people getting up. I like it. I'm going to stop my camera for a minute. 5 minutes seems like maybe next time I might do 5 minutes, not 10 minutes. Feels like a long time to wait. People are starting to pop back on. My battery is low. Thanks, Christina. I'm gonna charge my computer. There we go. Right? Does that work? Plugged in. Okay. Good. Thank my cats for that. We have a couple more people. Looks like need to pop back in. How's everyone doing? Am I talking too fast? No? Okay. Great. Thank you for being patient with the change of the class dates. Sorry, I know that wasn't best practice, but I guess that happens in the grant world. Craig, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to do the introduction really quick. I can get rid of that. Okay. All right. Can everyone see that screen with Craig? I can't see you anymore. Farmer Craig is a 10th generation, 76-year-old farmer from Old Mystic, Connecticut. In September of 2023, he retired as the farm manager at Denison Pequatsapos Nature Center. He had the Craig Floyd Giving Garden at Coogan Farm. He teaches many classes in regenerative agriculture to students all over the country and managed a volunteer workforce of over 300 people. Craig also serves as the commander of the Hugo A. Simolini VFW Post 3263 in Mystic, Connecticut, and he's here to talk about his experiences with regenerative agriculture and how he helps veterans with PTSD. Craig, you have an extensive list of resources available, and I have actually made a document so that we can share that list with everyone. So everyone here, you don't need to try to scramble to write down all of those resources. Take it away.
All right. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
Okay.
And you know what, that one and share and slideshow. And you should be able to see that full screen. All right, so Tricia, I can see you. Can you see that full screen?
I do see full screen.
Okay, okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I don't, it's all young people I'm talking to here. I don't know why you want an old guy talking to you, but be that as it may. And love Maine. I was stationed at Loring Air Force Base for 7 years. That's one of my many different assignments, and loved it up there. Farmed up there. Grew a lot of potatoes. That's potato country up there in Aroostook County, and so enjoy it very much. We'll get going with this. Again, this is a great program. God bless you for doing it, helping our veterans. It's a sad state of affairs, but I won't get into politics here. So in 2013, the Denison Pequot-Sepoos, and that stands for that's Pequot for Little River of the Pequots. The Denison Pequot-Sepoos Nature Center in Mystic, Connecticut, purchased the what is now known as a Coogan Farm. That farm was established in 1654, and it was basically there to feed the workers at what is now Mystic Seaport. It was a shipbuilding community at the time. So when they first bought this, they hired a horticulturist. Mistake number one. And he wanted to farm in circles. So he put in overhead irrigation, and you can't see it, but right at the bottom of the screen is where one of the first ones is. And you can see he's got these little circles because the overhead sprinkler would shoot out 75 feet in one direction. And so that's why he decided to do circles. He also decided to have pigs. I used to raise a lot of pigs, had them all on pasture over here in the woods. And his idea was to get the pigs to do the plowing. That don't work too well. And so the board of trustees decided that this wasn't going to work out, and they decided to hire me. And so when I took over, the board of trustees said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, the first thing I want a job description. Tell me how much you're going to pay me, and then get out of my way and let me do what I got to do. Oh, by the way, I need the largest excavator you can find." You know, there's a saying here in Mystic that God made the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he threw stones at Stonington. We have a lot of stone, and they were building a retirement community right next to us. It's hard to tell how big this thing is, but I could stand in that bucket, and I'm 6'3", and not touch the top of the bucket with my head. The issue was a lot of stone. You can't farm in stone. And so what they did is they brought this machine in, and I told the trustees, "I'm going to kill your soil and everything in it. But I'm going to bring it back. You're just going to have to give me a couple of years." And so we got this guy to come over, and he dug some big holes and buried stones down 25 feet, raised my grade 4 feet on the south end, and really changed things. And picked up, like I say, a lot of big stone. Supposedly that stone weighs 30 tons. And I asked the operator, I said, "How the hell do you know that thing weighs 30 tons? He says, "You watch me when I move." And the machine just about would tip over. And so now that particular stone is up in front of our herb garden. So we got all the stones out of there, and then they brought a bulldozer in, which of course caused a lot of compaction, and made everything nice and flat and pretty and whatever. And so this is kind of what it looked like. We picked stones for years, and we're still picking stones. So here, what's going on is the ladies, and most of my volunteers were ladies, and I would only have 2 or 3 guys on the farm from time to time. So the women did all the work. They're spreading carbonatite right here. We put a lot of stuff in the soil before we rented a bed shaper, and actually designed the garden that was going to come out of this mess of stone. And so I borrowed a bed shaper, and we purchased a tractor. The local Rotary got together with 5 different chapters, and they sent me or they actually brought me a check for $26,000. And they said, "Buy whatever tractor you want." So I went to the place, and I found a tractor for $25,990. So that means I had $10 left for a beer. That was a good thing. But I got to bed, and then borrowed a bed shaper and put these in here. This slides are kind of out of sequence time-wise, because you can see that fence behind us. We hired the Amish to come in. It cost us 12 grand for that fence. It's 8 foot high. It keeps everything out except for the confounded squirrels. And because it's a nonprofit, I can't bring my pellet gun to work and shoot the squirrels for a little squirrel stew. But anyway, we can still grow when they're after our goodies. And you can see that big white post there. That's one of 6 vertical posts that we put in for irrigation system. And so I told them, "Well, I don't want to do that. We want to use drip tape." And so we put in drip tape as well. And then as we progressed along, you can see that this is what the first fence that we put in there. This is a solar powered battery to try to keep out the critters. The rabbits, they outsmarted me, and they'd get into the garden. And of course, the thing is, you know, I'm 76. I don't run too fast. So I could never catch the confounded rabbits, and I couldn't bring a slingshot to work either. So we had a little discussion, and that's why we went ahead and put in that big fence to keep the deer out and keep out the rabbits as well. So, and then we had Zach's Nuclear Engineering come and build us an herb garden, because 100% of what we grow is donated to the food insecure. And right now there's 32,000 food insecure people in New London County. I don't know why there's so many, and people should not go hungry, especially children that are going to school. And oh, by the way, on top of everything else, your food sucks, because the nutritional quality is like 80% deficient from what it was in 1940, and people have zero clue about what they're eating. But anyway, if you want to see a good exercise in watching some smart guys try to do something, have you ever seen 20 engineers build a level fence in an unlevel slope? Well, they did it, and it worked out pretty well. And this is what the garden looks like now.
Progress.
And you can see that we have a greenhouse in the back. The Navy put that up for me, and the Caterpillar tunnel on this side. And we are 11,800 square feet plantable. And we have some work done on the trees to get rid of some of that shade, but we still have shady areas. Nature Center doesn't like me cutting down trees. So again, we established in 2014. That garden is in a 30,000 square foot area with 11,800 square feet plantable. The garden grows many, how do I get rid of this thing? Many different kinds of vegetables and fruit. It contains a hedgerow. We have apple, pear, and peach trees, grapes, blueberries, strawberries, gooseberries, and elderberries. We have sorry about that. We have an herb garden that in 2023 donated over 800 pounds of herbs. I would submit that that's an awful lot of basil. The garden is worked by an all-volunteer workforce and led by a paid garden manager. And the garden follows a very strict definition of regenerative agriculture. We use a lot of seaweed. If you're not using seaweed, you're missing out. So you folks up there in Maine, you need to get a couple of trucks and come down here to the seacoast and get seaweed. Typically on our garden, we would do 50 truckloads per season. There is no better mulch than seaweed, and it's really great stuff. The bugs don't like it. The mice and the voles don't like it. It adds an awful lot of minerals to the soil. It keeps things warm, keeps things moist, and we wouldn't have this garden producing as much as we do if we didn't have the seaweed. We make our own our own compost, of course. We use biochar, the salt, carbonatite, azomite, and practice minimum disturbance of the soil. You do understand there's no such thing as a no-till garden, right? Because the definition of tillage is any disturbance of the soil. So as soon as you put that little hand trowel in the soil and you stick a tomato plant in there, you're doing tillage. But everybody gets what I'm talking about when I say that we're a no-till garden. There's no guy out there with a machine. We don't do that. We build soil in layers just like Mother Nature does. We do foliar feeds about every week, and we use a lot of beneficial insects. We've got a pollinator hotel on site, which is loaded with critters. In my last year as garden manager, which was 2022, we donated 22,736 pounds of produce to the Gamma Moran Food Bank in New London, Connecticut. And I'll back up there a little bit. In 2014, the production was 2,080 pounds out of the same 11,800 square feet plantable. The following year, it was 3,500. The Board of Trustees said, "Oh my God, this is good. You've got a production." I said, "Nope, I don't even have Mother Nature's attention yet." The following year, it was 13,089 pounds. I said, "Now I've got her attention." And we just kept on growing from there. Of course, when COVID hit, I was the only one allowed to be in there. You know, I don't mind hard work, but Jesus, I can't do 11,000 square feet of weeding. So that's a lot. So things did suffer a little bit then, but we're back in it now. Our total donation since conception is way over 100,000 pounds of nutrient-dense food. Our production is picked up every Tuesday and Thursdays in a refrigerated box truck, taken to New London, offloaded, then it's onloaded to the mobile food pantry, which is like a Coca-Cola truck with a slide up side doors, and then sent to 10 different locations each month. We can get our produce to our customers sometimes within 5 hours. So that's pretty fresh. The garden attracts many different organizations to help with tasks. We have young people with special needs, adults with special needs, veterans with PTSD, myself included, high school, grade school, college students. We encourage our volunteers to work without gloves if you can. We also encourage them to work barefoot, though few actually do. Why is it important for these folks to garden or farm? Why is it important for veterans to farm? As a veteran with PTSD, I know firsthand the importance of being in the soil. Any disturbance of the soil releases bacteria. Our inhalation of that bacteria generates a production and release of serotonin. 10 months out of the year, I don't need any PTSD meds. It really makes a difference. And there's a link right there that will kind of back up what it is that I'm trying to say. So the soil contains this bacteria that is also absorbed through the skin of the fingers and the palms when gardening, triggering a release of serotonin in the brain, the happy hormone. Serotonin is a natural antidepressant and mood lifter. It also strengthens the immune system and provides a general sense of well-being. Bacteria found in the soil is also a primary source of antibiotics and other medicines, as further evidence of soils as a vital human life support system. So we've got a couple boxes of gloves. And the little kids, like these kids in this picture here, you know, they come in and they say, "Come on, can I have some gloves?" Well, how about we try without gloves first? And I do that for this reason. I want them to have that human to soil contact. When we sift compost, we have a sifting station that will hold 5 wheelbarrows. And I don't know what it's called, but if you see those guys that go around with lawn care companies, and they got a trailer behind that F-350, and there's a ramp at the end of the trailer that's made out of this cross wire or whatever you want to call it. That's what we use on the top of our sifting bench. And when I send people up there, I want them to not use gloves if at all possible. Of course, if they say they have to have gloves, then okay. Because it does make a difference. So I'm going to tell you a favorite story. We would get people with special needs that were severely challenged from a group called Lighthouse in New London. And we get a half a dozen of them. These were young adults. And so a few years ago, they came in and there was a new guy, young fellow. I'm going to say he's probably in his 20s, I guess. Hard to tell. And it looked like he had on a parachute, or at least the harness part of the parachute. I mean, he was cinched up tight, shoulders, crotch, everything. And there was this big guy, a lot of muscle, had a hold of him by the strap. And wherever they went together. The big guy was always holding on to this young man. And so the leader of the work party said, "What do you want us to do?" And I said, "I'd like you to go up and sift compost." And so there they go, the big guy holding on to this young fella who obviously had some kind of a major issue. None of my business what it is or what it was. And they're up there sifting. I let them go for half hour, 45 minutes. And I walked up there and, you know, I'm kind of friendly to everybody. And evidently I got a little bit too close to the guy with the harness. And he reached out and he grabbed me by the shoulder. And the big guy said, no, 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 don't hurt him, don't hurt him, talking to the young guy. And I said, brother, if he hurts me, I'll back up, leave him alone. So the young guy was completely nonverbal, but he was looking me dead in the eye and holding onto my shoulder. And pretty soon it's like he's squeezing my arm, going down my arm, and we're holding hands. Now, it was quite an experience. He's looking at me. I know he wanted to say something. He's trying to communicate with me, but there's no communication other than the fact that he's holding my hand. And so after a little bit, he let go, I let go. I went about my business. They left. Next week, they come back. And here's that young guy. No harness, no big guy. Now, I can't sit here and tell you it was because of the soil, but I think it was because of the soil and what it did. And he continued to come every week and never had a problem, never had an issue. The soil heals. It doesn't just grow vegetables, it heals us. So for all of you veterans that are suffering with PTSD, this is one way to do it. And I can tell you, if you have a farm that has a greenhouse or a hoop house, what's the difference? Well, greenhouse means that there's heat in there. When we have a hoop house or a high tunnel, we don't have a greenhouse. And I like to have a cigar from time to time, a little glass of wine. And so I go out and buy a couple of bales of hay in January, February, when it's cold and there's snow on the ground. And I'll spread a little bit of hay inside the high tunnel, where we've got garden beds in there and veggies and whatever, and take the other bale of hay and use that as a backrest, pop the cork on the wine bottle, light the cigar. Ain't nothing better. It's good stuff. So how do we farm at Coogan Farm? Plant sap analysis. This is relatively new. It's about 10 years old. In addition to a soil test, which is inaccurate, all it does, it tells you what's in the soil. Doesn't mean it's plant available, like manganese as an example. It's hard. But we still do a soil test just to get an idea of what's in the soil. But the plant sap analysis is like an interpreter for the plant. It's unbelievable. They ain't cheap. They're like $95 for a plant sap analysis. And Advancing Eco Agriculture actually wants you to do a multitude of them, at least 3 anyway. So what this does is it teaches us how to feed the plant what she wants, depending on her CPI, or critical points of influence. So look at it this way. We're an awful lot like the soil in the fact that we're like 90% bacterial cells and 10% human cells. So what's going on with us is kind of like what goes on in the soil. So think of a pregnant woman. When a woman gets pregnant, there's sometimes during that pregnancy, she eats some really strange stuff. And there's no explanation for it. She just decides she wants to eat weird stuff. Well, plants are exactly the same way. They have the CPI, the critical points of influence, which means that different times throughout the lifespan of that particular vegetable, she wants different things in different amounts to be able to do what it is that she wants to do. We don't use chemicals. We don't need them. We don't have anything to spray the bugs. Any plant that will Brix over 12 is indigestible to the bug, and they can't digest it. So they go next door to somebody else and they leave me alone. Weeds are our friends, never ever bare soil. And say another story. Had a lady come in the garden one year. She came in the gate. First thing she says to me, "I'm a master gardener." I said, "Oh, okay. What do you want me to do?" I said, "I want you to go over here and weed this bed." That's all I told her. And she went over there and she started pulling the weeds out, everything. And I let her be for about a half an hour. And then I went over to her and I said, "How are you making out?" She says, "Good." I said, what are you doing?" She said, "I'm weeding." I said, "Yeah, but I never told you to pull the weeds out. You should cut them off. Leave the roots in the ground. Feed the microbiology. You don't feed the microbiology, they're going to say, "Dude, I'm out of here." So never bare soil. Keep the roots in the sort of heavy use of cover crops, multi-species, 20, 25 different things in cover crops. Sometimes we'll put some beds in cover crop at the beginning of the season. Sometimes we'll do it in the middle of it. Sometimes we'll do it while we have the main crop still in there. I mean, you can sow your cover crops in your garden right with your squashes, as an example. And by the way, if you use daikon radish or groundhog radish, which is like a white icicle radish, if you plant those between your squash plants, the squash bugs don't like it, and they'll leave the squash plants alone. So remember, microbiology trumps everything. You have got to increase your microbiology, and there's many, many different ways that you can do that. This shows you what a plant sap analysis looks like. The document on the left-hand side is what you actually get from Nova Crop Control. And then these two things don't actually go together, but something I could find this morning. You can see the different CPI here on a fruit tree. And this comes from Advancing Eco Agriculture. It tells you what to use of their different products, which work out extremely well. But that's a whole nother class. It's a little complicated, but it makes a huge difference in the way it works. Just to kind of skim over it in case you don't know what a plant sap analysis is. If you got the money, you test every plant. But at 95 bucks a test, I don't believe you can do that. So what's your high value crop? Everybody loves tomatoes. So I decided to do, okay, just tomatoes. And so you take a lower, still viable leaf in an upper, fully developed leaf, and you send them to Crop Production Services in New York, and then it goes to Nova Crop Control in the Netherlands. It has to be there, pardon me, by a particular time on a particular day. And if you get this report back. Then, depending on the mobility of the nutrient, the plant is telling you, if I have more of it in my lower leaf, I want more. Or if it's a different kind of mobility, then it would be the upper leaf. You need to know which is which. But the plant will actually tell you, I don't need any more of that stuff, or I don't have anywhere near enough. You got to give me more, and you got to give me more right now. And you do it through a foliar or a drench. And our foliars are changed every week. And we use AEA products. AEA stands for Advancing Eco Agriculture. When you have spare time and you're doing nothing and you're sitting down having a little glass of wine, watch John Kemp's YouTube channel or go to the AEA site. They just changed their website, and they got some new products coming out. If any of you are already farming and you know what flea beetles are, if you have an issue with flea beetles, John is coming out with a new product called Initiate, which will eliminate flea beetles, which is a great thing. Nigel Palmer Recipes. Nigel's a good friend of mine. He comes down here and steals my seaweed. He's a good guy. I said to him the other day, I said, you know, every time your mouth is moving, I'm learning something. He's very, very giving of his time and his information. But he's got a book. It's called The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Garden Amendments Using Locally Sourced Materials to Make Mineral and Biological Extracts and Ferments. You might want to get a copy of it. He's also got a YouTube channel. Brian O'Hara Brian looks like a rocket science. He's a brilliant guy. He also has a book called No-Till Intensive Vegetable Culture. He's from Lebanon, Connecticut, and so he's close. There's another product that we use called Quantum. Quantum is all microbiology. You can get that from Green Earth, Ag, and Turf in Brantford. They have an online presence, of course. Jadam, Korean Natural Farming, IMO 1, 2, 3, and 4. All ways to add microbiology to your soil. But we're focused on plant response. Just because I think it's right, or you think it's right, or the master gardener thinks it's right, don't mean nothing if the plant doesn't think it's right. You've got to be observant. Your number one tool in the garden is your power of observation. And I would submit that veterans have better observational skills than pretty much anybody else. So take use of that and look at your plant response. It's really important. You also want to focus on companion planting. Remember that plants need friends too. As an example, excuse the phone in the background, I can't reach it. In a 30-inch wide row, we plant tomatoes down the middle of 60 inches apart. 60 inches. 4 basil plants around the tomato. It increases the flavor of the tomato. 2 rows either side of the tomatoes in onions. 2 rows either side of the onions in carrots. So in other words, we've got carrots, onions, basil, tomato all in the same row, as well as borage between every 3rd tomato, marigolds and nasturtiums, calendula, all added to the bed as space allows. And the tomatoes are trellised on 10-foot tall oak posts and number 9 wire using tomahawks from Shawnee's. And that's kind of what it looks like. That's on my farm. Taken many, many years ago. Our hedgerow, you should have a hedgerow about every 100 feet. We grow elderberries, comfrey. Remember, comfrey is very, very invasive, but for foliars, it's wonderful stuff. Gooseberries, lots of flowers, strawberries, and never any bare soil anywhere in the garden except. The only time that you have bare soil is when you've pulled one crop out, you're re-amending the bed with compost, worm castings, etc., raking it back out to 30 inches and planting it. You should be able to pull the crop out, re-amend the bed if you've got enough volunteers, get it replanted again in just a couple hours. And that's what that garden looks like in the height of the summer. You can see there isn't a lot of room to walk, and but it works good because they all like each other. If you want to learn more, there's some more links there for you, and worthwhile taking a look at it. If you ever get a chance to go to some of these bigger conferences, the Bionutrient Food Association used to have a conference every year. Acres USA, they just changed ownership. And you heard it here first. John Kemp is going to be having a conference, I believe, in Florida next year. If you can afford to go, it costs you about $2,000 by the time you pay for everything. It's worth it because you just learn so much from John, and he's so giving with his information. There's some more information right there about John and his YouTube channel. I mean, you can just spend hours and hours and hours watching his information, as well as Nigel and Brian. John also has a thing called Kind Harvest, where you can learn about redox. If you don't know what redox is, anyway, you can take that course. I think it's about $150 to learn a little bit more about redox and the voltage in the soil and the electricity in the soil, and how that's all working. Now, the question is, why should I be a regenerative farmer versus a conventional farmer? You know, I'm a 10th generation farmer. If I went to my grandfather and said, Grandpa, you got to do things this way, he'd say, you need to go shovel the cow shit out of the barn and make yourself useful instead of thinking about that kind of weird stuff. But if you are a conventional farmer, for every dollar that you make, I, as a regenerative farmer, are going to make 73. Singing Frogs Farm, they have a web presence. They're in Sestable, California. They're making over 100 grand per acre. Their employees have paid vacation time, and they get paid year round. What farm does that? So it really does work. You can just do so much, and if you are a giving garden, or you want to manage a giving garden, where everything you're growing, you're giving away, you're only going to get so much space. You need to get every possible ounce out of that garden as possible. And so you focus on the soil, focus on the plants, focus on regenerative farming, and it makes a huge difference. I don't say this lightly, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, you contact me pretty much anytime you have questions. Trish has my email address, my cell phone number. Text works best for me because I am pretty busy. And unless it requires a long answer, and then we can do a Zoom class if that's what you want to do, or we can just chat on the phone. And I'm also on a new site. We just started, Nigel and myself and a fellow named Bruce started this new site. It's called Regenerative Collaborations Benefiting Nature. And I'm on that site just about every day. And also I have classes available through the Denison Pequot Seepers Nature Center. And you can see a 19-minute video about our garden at that link there. That guy that filmed that video, he spent a year with us. And I always had a camera in my face. I got used to it after a while. But he did a wonderful, wonderful job. I don't know how many hours of film he had, but it's down to 19 minutes. So you can kind of get an idea of what it is we're doing at Coogan's Farm. So I'm going to come out of this stop here. I hope I didn't go too quick.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Any questions I can answer?
Yep. If anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat. You can raise your hand. Go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah, the bricks measurement of the plant sap, is that, so that must be measuring more than just sucrose? Is that just all dissolved solids?
So you're using the sap. So what it is, first of all, you've got to have two things. One is a reflectometer, and you can get them they're about $100. And the other is a special pair of vice grips that has like two spoons welded together. One fits inside the other. So you put the leaf material in one, and then you squeeze it, and when you squeeze it, it gets the sap out of that leaf, and that's what you put on the little window screen of the refractometer. It looks like a little telescope, and you look through that thing, and it's got different. It's like looking through a rifle sight, and it's got different grades on it, and that when it changes the color, that tells you what the actual bricks number is.
Yeah, I use a refractometer in brewing, so it's probably a specific for plants.
Yeah. Does it have a little thing on the end that, first of all, one end's an eyepiece, a black eyepiece. The other end is got a thing that opens up, and you can put, and then when you close it down, it's like doing a slide with a microscope.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure because you said it was like $100. I didn't spend that much on mine, but I wonder if there's a different scale for the plant version.
I don't have an answer to that question. But thank you for the question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Because I'm getting off easy here.
I just wanted to add, when I met you, the reason why I knew that I wanted you to speak to the class was because of your testament to the power of gardening and farming and the connection with veterans and so I hope that everyone here took that away from your presentation. Also, you made some great points about connecting with local resources in your community. And what I found is that so many people are wanting to support local agriculture. So reaching out and telling your story to people and connecting, I haven't had anyone turn me down about anything that I've asked them to help with.
It is amazing the generosity of people and what they have shown us in the Giving Garden. And I'll give you one example. First of all, because I worked for a nonprofit, nonprofits have 4 favorite words. We have no money. And so you have to kind of cheat and squeeze a little bit. And you can't always report to the boss exactly how much money just walked in your gate, because she'll want to use it for something else when I need it for seeds or BioCoat Gold or something like that. So I had this couple walk into the garden one day and they said, Craig, can we talk to you for a minute? And I said, sure. Can we go someplace, private? And so we went up to the maple tree and sat down on a picnic table. And I said, what can I do for you? So we belong to a family organization, and there's 6 of us in the family. And so every 6 years we get a opportunity to make a decision on where a small donation should go to. And we'd like to know, what do you need? And I said, well, can you define the word small? And they said 15,000. I said 15,000 is not small. That's how I got my Caterpillar tunnel, and it's how I got the snowplow for the front of our tractor. People want to help, especially if you're helping others, and it makes a huge difference. And I'll tell you one more short story. We have a guy that came to me, Army fella, severe PTSD, got in a lot of trouble, drank heavy, drugged heavy, got in fights and spent some time in jail and whatever. Then he found the farm and me, and I invited him to come to the VFW, and you're welcome to have a soda or whatever you want, but I prefer you have a soda. And he started working with me in the garden. I'm talking 100% turnaround. Unbelievable what the garden did with him. And like I say, most of my volunteers were ladies over 60. They all loved him because he, can you pick this up for us, and can you move this here and move this? He was wonderful. It was a success story, and so I would say that you guys are on the right track, and keep it up, and get some dirt under those fingernails.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I have all of those links that I will share with the entire class via email. And yeah, are you gonna stay on with us, or are you off to the VFW for your blood drive?
I've got to open up for the blood drive.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me, everybody. See you later.
All right. So, oh, I'll pass it on to him, Darcy. I don't think he got to see your message, or in Ariana. All right, so we are cruising with our lessons. I'm going to go ahead and go over a little bit of stress and risk management. So under human risk, we're going to cover stress a little bit because it ties into our last presenter. So if you guys want to hang tight, let me share this, hopefully. All right. So this is not a new concept to any of us here. We all know what stress is. But I'm going to go over stress, and I'm going to go over some things that maybe we forget about in our daily lives and that we could implement, because farming is stressful. Military was stressful, and so is farming. It's not an easy job. Any of these farmers that you talk to, no one says it's easy. So stress is our body's reaction to a threatening event or stimulus. Such events are called stressors. We know that. People differ in how they perceive and react to stress. And something that one person might rate as highly stressful might be less stressful for another person. And the University of Wisconsin-Madison created this slideshow, Chronic Farm Stress and Breaking the Cycle. Several factors that they listed that influence our ability to handle stress include the presence of social networks. So your family, your friends, your community groups, your church, and your schools. Your VFW would be a great one. Just reach out, make sure you have somebody to talk to. Our skills and confidence as we think about complex situations and then develop, evaluate, and take actions to solve problems. And there are also personal variables, your physical health, your experiences, your confidence, your anxiety threshold, and your problem-solving ability. Stress responses cause our blood pressure to rise, our heart rate to increase, our digestive system to slow down, and blood to clot more quickly. This has been studied. It's something you know, and it used to be useful. I mean, if we were fighting a predator and these things happened, we could direct our energy to escape the situations. But it's not quite as necessary when we're not fighting a bear. So I just wanted to, this is also from the slideshow. These physical health, brain function, and decision-making impairments often create a vicious cycle. When we find it difficult to make well thought out decisions and to move forward, sometimes this can lead to choices or conversations that might be less than desirable. A poor contemplated decision or no decision at all can cause even more stress, which further fuels the response. This cycle can lead to feelings of hopelessness, anxiety, and other concerns, which can turn be linked to depression and a risk of suicide. And we all know that veterans and suicide are unfortunately connected. So fortunately, all of these changes that occur under high stress can be managed and reversed through, it takes multiple tactics and strategies to tackle this issue holistically. So there's a video here on stress, and I think we have time to watch it. Hopefully it's just 6 minutes, so you guys can sit back and listen. Hopefully can you hear it? Thumbs up? Great. All right, it looks like people are having trouble hearing it, so I'm gonna stop it there. But I will include the link so you guys can finish that up. I had a feeling I was gonna have some trouble. Um, with that. My screen is muted. Your other screen's muted. Okay, I'll work on that. But the rest of the slide just goes over quality sleep, exercise, mindfulness, breathing, and then obviously having support systems with your healthcare providers, your friends, and your family. And then, so like I said, this is all from Chronic Farm Stress, Breaking the Cycle, which was presented at the American Farm Bureau Conference for young farmers, educators, and here are other references for that information provided. And there is one more video that I want you to watch. I'll include it again in the email. It's about 16 minutes, but it's not closed captioned, and I'm not gonna play it if you guys can't hear it or see it. And then what I wanted to do was kind of just show you on the Boots to Bushels page, if you go under content, there's a farm stress and under content there is human resources and then farm stress and resilience, and there's all of these tabs for each of your state. I went ahead, each state has an agency that will help you find resources. Some offer counseling, so that is a good resource. You should all look up your own state. And then we have two more presenters. What time is it? We are cruising. The next presenter is at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to, forgot you guys can see what I'm flipping through. Stop that share. I'm going to see if anybody has any questions at this point, any questions about the course content or the stress that we just talked about. Otherwise, I'm going to have you guys break until 11. I know it's a long break, but that's when our next presenter is going to talk. You're all so quiet. Are we good? Smiles? I got some smiles, some head nods. All right. Okay. Thanks, Darcy. All right, so we'll take a break for a bit. We'll come back at 11. I know it's a long time, but I appreciate it. And guys, get some lunch in there, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Yes. Yes, you can eat off camera. I also ate off camera. All right. Oh, that's a good view, Kirsten. I like that one better.
Yeah, me too. I don't look as long and weird.
Okay, let me just give you a super quick. Kirsten and Chris are from Muddy Roots Farm in Wallington, Connecticut. Chris is a veteran, and that's all I'm going to say because they have a great slideshow and presentation all set for you guys. So let me just share that. Nope. Slideshow. Here we go. All right, we're ready for you.
Hey guys, my name's Chris Wellington. My wife Kirsten and I own Muddy Roots Farm in Wallingford, Connecticut. We are kind of a small, diversified, I would say half like market garden type setup for veg, and then half pastured poultry and forest raised pork. So we kind of split it up, the livestock and the veg, right down the middle, just about. We operate on, I would say, about 7 acres. About one of that is for our veg, and then the remainder is pasture for our chickens and woodlot for our pigs. We practice no-till, kind of very similar to most of the new market garden setups these days, modeled after a lot of Jean Martin stuff, Curtis Stone stuff, Elliott stuff, no-till, permanent bed system, et cetera, et cetera. In our pastured poultry, we move the birds every single day. They live in a brooder for the first 4 weeks, and then they're moved out to pasture for the remaining 6. We move them every single day, and we slaughter on farm. That's kind of another big thing we do here. Once the chicks arrive to us, they don't leave until they're processed and ready for the end user. We are one of 2 state inspected processing facilities in Connecticut, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and that's about it. Kirsten, anything else you want to add for our intro?
So we started our farm in 2016. So this is our 8th season. We were growing veg and raising chickens prior to officially licensing ourselves with the state. So we're an LLC, which is kind of important. If you guys are just getting into it, make sure you protect yourselves and your business. I would form an LLC or an S Corp, one of those. The farm itself has been in my family since the 1700s. It was officially a placard reads 1740, but we believe that it was actually lived on sometime in the 1600s. We're just not sure. There's really no records, unfortunately. So the farm itself is owned by my family, and it's an actual bicentennial farm. There's not very many in the country. It was recognized by the government.
The signing of the Constitution.
Right on the signing of the Constitution. So there's a bit of a legacy here that we're trying to carry on. Currently, the rest of it's about 100-acre property. So like Chris said, we lease about 7 or 8 acres, just depending on the season and where we end up putting our animals. As you can see in the slide, that's pretty much our main growing outdoor space. So we rest 1 quadrant a year. Sorry, there's a cat. We rest 1 quadrant each year. And you can see the tarp, we tarp it. So as Chris said, we practice really no-till and more or less organic methods. And part of that is keeping the soil covered, whether it be by tarps, by straw, leaf litter, cover cropping is huge. And then the rest is for the animals. And we'll get to those slides in a little bit. But yeah, we kind of didn't want to work behind computers and for the big guy anymore. And we kind of just jumped all in one year and haven't really looked back since. I know you want to talk about your veteran stuff. So.
Yeah, so at the time when we were considering getting into farming, there was a lot of stuff in the Farm Bill for veterans. There was a lot of nonprofits starting up to help veterans transition into agriculture. And there still is. That being said, I was lucky enough to kind of piggyback with a nonprofit out of the Hudson Valley called Heroic Foods. And I went to a high tunnel building workshop, and I met a bunch of cool people and people that were involved with agriculture at a bigger scale. And that kind of skyrocketed Kirsten and I's desire to get into it, because we now realize that there was funding, there was assistance, there was education. And that was huge. That was absolutely huge, because for the first 3-4 years, we were doing nothing but going to conferences and listening to podcasts and reading every book we could find and talking to our peers, probably annoying them, is how hungry we were.
Sorry, I have a cat in the way. Hold on. Sorry.
That being said, there's also priorities given to veteran-owned farms when you go for grants through agencies like the NRCS or the USDA. So that gives us a little bit of a leg up, which is great. Yeah. Speaking on the grant funding, that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think anybody looking to get into getting into small scale agriculture or any agriculture at that rate should be taught about the availability of funding and how to get set up for that stuff. Because it's damn near impossible to build out your infrastructure as a beginning farmer without that assistance. And we're talking things like high tunnels and wells and drainage and processing rooms. There's funding for everything. You just need to know who to talk to and how to make yourself look good on paper.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle for beginning farmers, and we're still facing it today. Farming isn't all about making the money. Farming is about doing what you love, being outside, providing one of the necessities of life to the people in your community. And one of the biggest hurdles that we have found and are still finding is financial availability of things. It's hard to have the income unless you come from a 9-to-5 and have a bunch of money saved up, and you can farm part-time, and your 9-to-5 pays for your farming. We didn't really have that. And so we really leaned heavily on grant funding. And Chris being a veteran, he kind of gets, we were veteran, minority, so women owned, and beginning farmers. And beginning farmers is anybody under 10 years farming. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're under 10 years farming, you're considered a beginning farmer. And there's a ton more grant opportunities for veterans, beginning farmers, and women or minority. All of our grants are actually under Chris's name because as a veteran, he got priority. And so we're kind of fortunate in that aspect. Yeah. So, and the barrier to entry in farming is financials and land. Again, we're fortunate. We have my family, and they were very gracious to let us use small parcels at a time, and we've gradually expanded into more acreage. And eventually, the hope is we can somehow work out some deal with the family members who actually own the property and take over more acreage as the years come along, and get into more other diversified farming enterprises like beef and eggs, possibly. We're just not there yet. So if you want to go into some slides, we can kind of break down, or if anybody has any questions real quick while we're just talking about the beginning stages of what we went through. I don't know how you guys want to play, how you were playing this.
Yeah, let's go through some slides.
Sure.
I can't see the chat while the slides are up. Lovely Zoom does that to me. So we can go through
Let me
those.
just look at the chat. Oh, there's nothing in the chat.
Nothing. Good. Okay. So the next slide is plant sales.
Yeah, so we got our greenhouse. That was kind of a disaster. Trying to get grant funding for a greenhouse. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar. There's different ways of getting grants. You have there's a lot of availability. You have the NRCS, which is the National Resource Conservation Service, which we rely heavily on. There's state. So we use Connecticut. I know you guys are kind of maybe not all in Connecticut, you're maybe more in Rhode Island, but we use the state ag. They have a few different grant programs. There's also AFT. So American Farmland Trust. We got a grant through them for a walk behind tractor called the BCS.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we used? There's a couple more, I can't just think of it, but so the greenhouse, we had applied for a grant funding through the state to coincide with a well we were digging at the same time. And unfortunately, the state, we needed the greenhouse up before we began our season in March of a few years ago. And unfortunately, the grant got approved, or our application got approved in like May. So we had to begin the project early. And unfortunately, they dropped funding for us because we couldn't technically start a project before we got our contract and approved.
Yeah, so the
It was kind of a
greenhouse,
disaster.
one of the biggest challenges with farming, especially in the Northeast, is seasonality and cash flow. And we're lucky enough to share some greenhouse space with a mentor of ours for a few years until we could kind of figure it out and figure out what our needs were. And we ended up building the house, I think 3 winters ago. But going back to the cash flow and seasonality thing, a seedling sale or a plant sale in the spring is a great way to front load your bank account going into the season. We also live in Wallingford is a very rural community. It's a very do-it-yourselfer community. There's a lot of money here, but even some of those wealthy people have their own gardens. And we realized really quickly that we had a very difficult time selling produce to them. So we started selling plants instead. And that allows us to kind of meet our social obligation with our community. Since we opted not to be able to provide produce, we can still kind of fulfill that and get them in our door and put food on their table in a different way. We also, speaking on the seasonality and the cash flow thing, we also sell a lot of our poultry pre-order. So we start taking payments for that in January, which keeps that bank account looking healthy, and it allows us to feel a little more comfortable buying in everything we need to get through the season.
Yeah, so early season costs for those that aren't farming or trying to get into it, you're looking at, depending on what you're doing, whether it be animal or vegetable, you're looking at cost of grain, chicks or piglets or calves or cows, whatever. Hay, if you need to feed something year-round, shavings, costs for animals, heat, so electricity, water. On the veg side, you got to get your potting soil, your pots, your seeds. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on, usually from December through February. And so any way that you guys can make income in those off months, unless you're, 4-season farmers, which means year-round farming, is really important. So for us, like Chris said, we put out our orders for people we put out options for people to order chicken. And we do about 60% of our chicken sales in January by pre-orders. And then the other 40% we offer at a farmer's market, which starts in June and runs through November. Plant sales will open up in April. So there's another little bit of income coming in. We're doing a CSA this year. So a community supported agriculture, for those that don't know. For our vegetables, so that brought in a little more income on that side. So a lot, we're not just it's a slow season, but we really still need to make a lot of effort so we can continue running our business and get ready for the upcoming season. So our plant sales huge. We do one in April for the cool weather crops like your broccolis, cauliflowers, kohlrabi, collards, lettuce, all that stuff. And then we do our major sale in May. And both combined can yield us about $12,000 in less than a month. And that's massively huge for our bank account going into the, late spring and summer. Most farms don't really start making a profit until, June, July. And so it's a big bump and a big boost to our bank account. As far as what we spend the most money on, it's grain. Our grain costs are astronomical. They're through the roof. We feed both our chickens and pigs a non-GMO grain milled in Connecticut. And you're talking, our chickens can go through 12 to 15, is it tons a year. Now we do about 1,200 chickens. So you do the math and that's a decent amount. And each ton is about $700. So it kind of adds up over time.
We want to go to the next slide.
Oh yeah.
Wake up, computer. There we are.
All right, so we do most of our tomato production in high tunnels. We do a couple rows out in the field just as an insurance policy if we get disease, which every year we do. You can see we manage or we train a single stem. We use roller hooks. We do peppers and eggplant on the hip walls of the high tunnels just because there's not as much vertical space.
So these high tunnels were grant funded, which was huge.
Yep, and grants we built them. So not counting our labor, they more or less are paid for in full.
I'm not sure. So as far as high tunnel production goes, with the rapidly changing climate that we're living in right now, the seasons are incredibly unpredictable. They're not normal. And the more we can control the environment, the better chances we have of continuing food production longer into the seasons and through all the inclement weather and weather patterns we've been getting. So for you guys coming on, especially you veterans, this is a really good opportunity if you have the space to talk to an NRCS agent and really see that they have so much money in the government right now that they are almost overpaying for, at least for us, for high tunnels. I mean, they have so much money that they're trying to just move right now. And so this is a really good time to try to get, in on funding opportunities with the NRCS especially. And what the NRCS is now doing, which is fantastic, is they're actually paying half the cost of the contract up front to help you get started. That's a new thing this year. We didn't know that until we were told. And so our agent said, hey, we can, if you're struggling to pay for these 2 high tunnels out of your own pockets, we can provide 50%. And that was awesome. That paid for the structure of both high tunnels that we're currently building for this season.
Does anybody have any questions before we move forward?
I have a question. Hi, I'm Danny. As far as, at what point did you start requesting money for high tunnels? Because I'm just beginning to farm. I'm about to go up to Maine and start my farm this year. And I feel like this year I'm just going to try to, get everything kind of the well dug and the field kind of laid down and cover cropped. And I have an NCRS agent coming out to the property, which has kind of helped me survey some stuff and help me with soil samples, things like that. But at one point do you recommend, applying? Because I feel like it's too early now to do this.
Well, the thing that it takes a little time to get kind of what I call into their system. You're already on their radar, which is great. Make sure you set up a business name, make sure all your business stuff is in order, because you can't apply for those grants until that stuff is in order. You're going to need some sort of a lease, a written lease or something. They're going to have a bunch of that legal paperwork type stuff that you're going to need before you can move forward. We struggled with that for a little while because this is family land, and we assumed that things could just be done on handshakes. And when you learn that you're working with the government, they need everything on paper, and the family didn't really want to put anything on paper. It was pulling teeth a little bit. But the sooner you can start, the better. And remember, you're not guaranteed that funding, so they may kick you to the next round or the next round. Or you may have to tweak some things on your end before, because it's all based around the fiscal year. It's not based around seasonality like we would assume it to be. But the sooner you can start, the better is my answer to that.
You're going to have to talk to your agent about when they open up applications. I don't know if they're open right now. They usually open applications in the fall. So you may just want to ask, because their fiscal year isn't like our normal year. So like their fiscal year closed, I think, in November or October of last year or something like that. So it's not like we would think what makes sense in our brain. It's the government. Nothing really makes sense. So I would just ask, just talk, having a really good relationship with your agent is amazing, because they will work for you. You'll know pretty quick if the agent knows what they're doing. And make sure you ask a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of questions. Our agent is I'm going to just do this. And we've learned over the years of working with her that we really need to ask every single question that we have. We have to ask about every opportunity that may come up and make sure all of our ducks in a row are in a row. We've kind of gotten pushed around a little bit and not given all the information. And so now we just know to ask the questions and just really make sure that they give you a really clear response.
Yeah. And you know, come to the table with, I'm sure all of you guys have all your ducks in a row, but the more they take you, I feel like our agent didn't take us seriously at first. And the sooner they can start taking you seriously and knowing that you're in this for the long run and you're serious about it and you really want to feed people, the more they're going to be willing to work for you. Because there's a lot of riffraff out there that take advantage of this funding and do the bare minimum and just to make a little bit of money. And it gives the farmers that are responsible and really need the money kind of a bad rap.
So someone just asked what NRCS stands for. It's the National Resource Conservation. What did I say?
Natural Resource Conservation Service.
It's with the USDA.
So they're just a branch of the USDA.
If you want to go to another slide, that would be great. I just put some stuff up here. I wasn't sure. Oh, so this is just out in our outdoor growing space. It was more or less showing you guys that we're very structured. Our rows are the same length, the same width. So we don't have to ever really worry about having one shorter row or one wider row than the others and trying to make sense of plant spacing and all that stuff. We do, because we're small, we grow probably on about 3/4 of an acre each year. Because we're small, we really focus on interplanting just to maximize the space that we do have. So, for instance, I think we had, I don't even know what's here. Oh, celery with leeks. I don't know. We did beets with hot peppers one year. I don't know. It just makes sense. I just want to show you guys kind of, this is more or less what we, how we grow each season. It's very standardized. So the math is simple. The tools we have are made for our space and our, help me out with the word.
So it took us a few years to learn that. The first space we started on, some of the rows were 72 feet, some of the rows were 75 feet, some of them were 65 feet. And when you're laying drip or fabric or agribon out and you're chasing that drip tape that you thought was 75 feet, but isn't, it's just, it really, the quicker you can make your systems efficient is the only way you're going to be happy and successful doing this job.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do. What length did you decide for your rows?
So this is a really interesting scenario. I won't dwell on it too much, but they used to use part of the space that we leased for housing the calves. This farm, like every other farm in New England, used to be a dairy. And we didn't know this when we took over the lease, but the first 100 feet or so of that Airfingers quote pasture was about an inch thick layer of topsoil with grass growing on it. And then below that was about 8 inches of really nasty gravel that they put down so it get muddy. So luckily we didn't drop a plow into that. So and then we have a property line on the other end. So we chose 80-foot rows, and we've actually shrunken them down a little bit to 75 because we incorporated a BCS walk behind tractor into the mix, and we need a little more space for that. They're 5 foot on center, 30-inch wide, 30 inches kind of the standard based solely around the tool systems that everybody's developed for market gardening. They're all kind of based around 30 inches.
We don't use any large tractors. All of our work is either manual or with the BCS machine. We have a compost spreader for that. We have a
Power Arrow. We just got a snow blower and a sickle bar for it. It's a great machine. If it fits your context, I highly recommend it.
And that was also received with a grant through the American Farmland Trust, one of their grant opportunities a few years ago. And it's been a complete game changer. I mean, the more you could take your body out of, the constant work of up, down, rake, making beds, bending over, going on your knees, the more you could take your body out of it, the more longevity you guys have farming. So we've learned over the years to try to minimize how much bending over and manual labor we do. So, you know, the BCS has been amazing. You'll see when we get to the chicken slides, we've actually taken our body almost completely out of the movement of the chickens every day. Yeah, so it works out great. The machine works out great. If you guys have ever have the ability to get access to it, I would definitely look into it. If that's the kind of farming you guys want to do, is more like, you know, less
So-
heavy machinery and less compaction farming.
Which
go to the-
BCS do you have?
We have the big one, the 853, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, I think it's just the
Oh.
picture.
Just to speak on that point too, something I'm glad we did, and I wish somebody told me anyways when we were starting. It takes a long time to figure out what you need and what fits your equation. There's countless examples out there of these people who put the rose-colored glasses on and dove headfirst into farming and bought every single tool that J.M. Fortier uses and Curtis Stone uses, and turned to find out 3 years in, they realize it doesn't really fit their system. So don't be afraid to be uncomfortable for that first few seasons until you can really understand the needs of your farm before investing in stuff. Talk to your peers. See if you could borrow their BCS for a day. See if you could borrow their wheel hoe for the day or the week, and see if it fits your context. Because again, we don't make a ton of money, and some of the good equipment is not cheap. So that was something that I'm glad we kind of took the time. It took us 5 or 6 years before we ended up investing in the BCS, whereas a lot of people do that right out of the gate.
It fits our context now. We were able to kind of have our systems in place so we can use it the way that it's meant to be used.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that we have good friends now that helped us when we were starting out to loan us their tools so we could see what made sense for us before we invested in things. So we kind of, you know, just don't be afraid to ask for help and ask for, you know, using things. We turned over 2 of our fields, and, you know, we disc seeded them for our poultry pastures because we are good friends with someone and he loaned us his big tractor and equipment. You know, just, it doesn't hurt to ask, and the worst they could say is no.
So this is just a good picture of kind of the diversity of produce that we do. Most of our produce gets sold at a farmer's market, and then we have a couple of restaurant accounts. We used to work with many more restaurants than we do today, but COVID kind of flipped that industry on its head in our area. A lot of the chefs that I knew are no longer cooking anymore, or the businesses are no longer open. Was super tragic, but it also, you know, we're always going to have to sidestep left and right as our market demands of us. So it was kind of fun to reinvent the wheel with that.
You can kind of see we could put out a lot in a little space. So don't be afraid to learn how to interplant, to learn what crops go together, what crops don't work together. You know, we grow from April to November when a frost hits, and then we're done. So, you know, these pictures are just like a really broad idea of what we grow. There is more options here that we do, but because we're so small, we chose to be different. We chose to grow different things so we can stand out amongst the big farms that grow your big red tomatoes and, you know, your just basic crops that everybody does. So we try to do different things and try to make ourselves unique and find a niche and fill a different market. And I think what's amazing for us is we're able to produce things that people haven't seen since their grandparents had a little backyard garden, or, you know, the Europeans or Asians who haven't seen it since they left their homeland. We, you know, like having the ability to be diverse in our crop selection has given us a really awesome opportunity to learn the history of other people and other cultures and feed people and, you know, show people that, guess what, a pepper isn't always green and a tomato's not always red.
Yeah, for sure. No, you can go to the next slide.
Yeah. Unless anybody has questions on the veg before we move on to chickens and pigs. Okay.
So this is one of the pastures that we lease. That was the first field that we kind of gained access to on the farm. We have 2 high tunnels there now. There's going to be 2 more where that turkey shelter is. kind of a mirror image of those original two.
They don't know what that is.
We used to graze that field with chickens. It's not really cut out for that because of the species of grass that we chose before we knew any better. However, since grant funding seems to be a topic today, we did get paid to seed that field and to maintain that field. And then the woodlot you see kind of to the bottom left is one of our 3 woodlots that we graze pigs in. So what we do is we utilize the pork kind of on the edges of our pastures, and we fence into the pasture, depending on the field, 20 to 50 feet. And what the pigs end up doing is their movement and their disturbance in and out of that woodlot really beats back those nasty transition species, the multiflora rose and the bittersweet and the barberry and things like that. And it keeps our edges maintained, which is cool. And the pigs are, raised in the woods, eating nuts and mast and all that good stuff. And they have a very unique flavor.
You'll see more pictures when we get into the pigs, how they run on the tree line.
Yeah, we could move forward. And if anybody has any questions, feel free.
Yeah, I'm curious about the like what kind of forage you found is the best for the pastured chickens.
We'll get to that in a
Right.
second.
Yeah, sure.
It's
a great question.
Yeah, and it's huge. Like, it took a long time for us to really monitor and watch our birds. So we're at the pit. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought we were going to chickens next. We're at the pigs.
Yeah, so you can
No, it's
kind
good.
of see there on the edge of that tree line. That's where, yeah. So towards the end of, so we get them in June, and then we ship them in October or early November. So we choose, on the topic of feedstuffs, we choose, if we can, to raise them under hardwoods. So any oaks or hickories, anything like that, because they absolutely love tree nuts. I absolutely love them.
This year was amazing. An amazing tree nut year. There was 5 days where our pigs didn't touch their grain, and we thought something was wrong with the grain. But in reality, is they were just finding so many nuts under the canopy of the trees that they didn't want their grain, which was really awesome. So we hope that happens.
The other cool thing about raising pork on a farm is they're a very holistic part of our system. Any of our spent tomatoes, basically any of our vegetable waste goes to the pigs. They're not terribly picky. I think eggplant and hot peppers, peppers in general, are the only things they don't eat. But everything else they have a field day with, it makes us feel better about giving it to them versus composting it. It's really neat anytime I kind of start to question whether or not they're profitable enough or whether or not they fit our context, or I'm just trying to find reasons to complain about raising pork, I think back to that complete stream for our produce, which is pretty incredible. And then we augment with spoiled pumpkins from some of the other farms in the fall when they're eating a ton of grain, and we're trying like hell to cut down on that.
If you want to, I don't know if there's a better picture of our fencing system anywhere. I don't remember if I put it in there or not.
So pigs you need to have your infrastructure in place. We do a 2-wire polybraid system through the woods with T-posts. That works really well for us. We take it down and put it up every year. It's getting easier now that we have the paddocks established. However, what I'm going to say is if you're going to try to raise pigs on a 2-wire system, you need a really hot fence charger, and you want to train them properly. So before we move them out to the woods, they spend about 4 weeks in a training pen where you're teaching them to respect that electric wire. And we could dwell on that for a while, so I'll spare you guys. But it's a very simple concept.
Yeah, we get them about 6 weeks old from some friends of ours in town, which is great. And the first usually 5 weeks, it takes about 5 weeks for them to really respect a fence, the 2-strand fence. And we keep them on the main farm within hog panels. And inside those hog panels is our 2-strand hot wire. So pigs have a natural tendency to run through things. Just think of them as like extra large bowling balls, and they just want to go through everything. And we can't have that happen on pasture when there's no barrier outside of their 2-strand wire. So usually as piglets, it takes them about 5 full weeks to not really test it anymore. And once they respect it, that's when we move them out to the fields. And they've never, knock on wood, gotten out of their perimeter fence, but because we we have our main perimeter fence, and then we have intermediary fences, so we can move them whenever the land can no longer sustain them. So we move them every week and a half to 2 weeks during the season. But they have gotten through that intermediary fence, and usually they go backwards where they're more familiar with rather than into the new space.
And we
But-
sell the pork by pre-order. We only do about 10 to 12 a year, so it's not a huge enterprise for us, and we only sell by the half and whole. We don't sell cuts at market. We don't do any of that. So when you I don't know what the right word for is, we put it out to our email list, and they basically, whoever gets back to
It's
us
first come, first serve.
when they get possession of a pig, I guess we could say, they tell us whether they want a half or whole, and then we transport the animal up to the slaughterhouse. We use Adams Farm up in Athol, Mass. They've been fantastic. And the customer fills out their cut sheet, and then we also go up and pick up the meat for our customer. But once we're done, once the animals are at the slaughterhouse, we're paid, and we're done with that for the
Yep.
season.
For those interested in getting into livestock or poultry that aren't going to be processing on the farm, you're going to have to start considering getting your slaughter date set months to a year or more in advance. Our pigs are scheduled over a year in advance. So in July this year, in July of 2023, I called to schedule for November of this year. And there was one date in November left.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes to show you how quickly things fill up. There's not many slaughterhouses. We're not in the Midwest. We're not in big chicken and pig country. Same thing with chicken, a USDA facility. You guys have Buffonis. I know that they're the USDA in Rhode Island. There's another USDA plant. They're friends of ours. They opened up in Connecticut here in Bethlehem. But that's something to consider if you're going to get into livestock and poultry, is really just make sure that you guys have dates set to ship your animals. They do get backed up, especially for pigs in the fall.
Yeah, same with Buffonis. I know I called last year just to get some data from them, and they were booked for the entire season. So before you even order chicks or order piglets from whoever you're getting them from, have your end process in place.
You can move on if you'd like. We'll get into
That's really good advice, though. So this is our pasture that we raise chickens in. We have for the last two or three seasons. You can kind of see the transition in the grass as we move them. We don't mow everything all at once, because what the tall grasses do is it allows them to build a more robust root system, and it keeps the pasture from drying out too quickly in a drought. And if we can wait long enough, they will
reseed themselves.
They'll reseed themselves, which is awesome. So we only mow kind of what we need to throughout the year, obviously keeping weather in mind and things like that. So going back to your question, if we can move forward one more, I think we'll get a better view. But what we learned over the years was chickens and turkeys only graze about 3 to 6 inches off the ground. They will eat taller stuff, but they don't prefer it. The other thing that we learned was they like really soft and tender grasses, and the shelters move a whole lot easier through what we call non-clumping grasses. So we've all seen those big stumps of grass in pastures, and if you hit one of those with a shelter, you're either going to damage the shelter, or it's not going to sit flat, and the predators are going to be able to reach up underneath and grab your birds. So we use a lot of trefoil, a lot of clover, a lot of alfalfa, a lot of timothy. The poultry really prefers it. And again, it's a way for us to try to cut down on our feed bill, is to give them more to forage from.
So this field was also on a grant with NRCS. We custom blended our pasture mix based on years of watching and monitoring our poultry and what they chose to eat. So there's a company, I forget who it was in Connecticut, that we use, and we custom blended with them. So we had our percentages. We had to get them approved by the NRCS, and then we got the pasture mix in and seeded it. There are areas that we have, because chickens will do damage around, like especially around their feeders. If it's raining, you get mud build up. So we do have to go behind them every once in a while in the spring and fall and reseed, which is not a big deal. Over 3 acres, we can manage that. But yeah, it's really nice because they go to town. It's great. We move them every single day for 6 weeks while they're on the pasture, and they get a full shelters move. So that's about 20
24 feet.
24 feet. And it's like they just love it. They just go right into grazing and barely touch their grain when we move them. It's really nice to see.
So we used to use the Joel Salatin style shelters. We used those for 5 or 6 years, and we really wanted to scale up. At our height, we had 8 or 9 of those shelters that we were moving by hand every single day. And we were really trying to take our bodies out of it, like we mentioned before. So we designed these new shelters, which there was a ton of design features that, again, we realized that those Salatin shelters don't really fit our context, or our predation issues was a huge one.
predation was huge.
And we don't have an army of interns like a lot of those big famous farms do to pull chicken shelters for me all day.
Also,
So what we did is the whole, starting from the point where we took over that field, we knew that we needed a really flat pasture to be able to carry these structures without there being any gaps. So that was the first step of incorporating these new big gigantic shelters into our system. The other end game goal was to be able to move them and water them by machine versus by hand. So I bought an old Toyota Tacoma, and I put a winch on the back that you can control with a remote. And there's a 100-gallon water tank that's wired to a pump that's wired to our battery. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It might take us a little bit longer, but we're moving 120 birds at a shot. So every day we're moving 360 chickens on pasture, which is really cool. And the only thing we're picking up by hand is the chain to hook up to the shelters and the buckets of feed. But we're still working through some kinks, and sometimes you got to run that thing for a season before you really know what it needs.
So if you guys notice, do you mind if I say something?
Go ahead.
So if you guys notice on the bottom of the shelter, you're seeing these yellow insulators. We have a hot wire running on the base of about 6 inches up from the base of our shelter. Raccoons are really smart, and they figured out how to get into the chickens. And so it is electrified. We have a solar panel. You could see in the middle of the screen on the back right of the shelter. It's a little solar charger, and it's not totally hot, but it's enough to dissuade a lot of the predators. We also mimic this off of our vegetable high tunnel. So there's roll down sides. So anytime there's a high wind or inclement weather, we can roll the sides down. And it gives the birds a little bit extra protection, especially when they're small and young. And I don't know can you move on to another, if you don't mind?
No, that's a good shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another
yeah.
reason why we kind of designed them around high tunnels and whatnot is because we wanted to use galvanized material. We build a lot of greenhouses and high tunnels, so we're familiar with the construction. We had access to, to all the clamps and all that stuff. There's a handful of really good Amish companies down in Pennsylvania. Nolts Greenhouse Supplies is one of them, NOLTS, and then Rainflow Irrigation for some of the veg stuff. But again, also, if you are creative, you could incorporate it into your poultry system. All of our waters we've always used are gravity fed. So we just fill that big blue tank that was in the previous slide every day, and that meets or exceeds the water needs for 120 birds.
Can I really quick? What we found, an unintentional good thing, is that if you look at both pictures, you'll see the bracing bar on the base that keeps the shelter from coming in on itself. There's 2 bars on the back and 2 in the front as well in the corners to keep it very stable. It ends up allowing the birds to get off the ground and roost. Now, a lot of the big farms don't want animals to roost because it creates this divot basically on their breastbone, and it can cause the breast itself to have a little bit of an indent in it. However, it keeps the animals very clean. It gives them a way to get off the ground if it's wet. And chickens naturally roost anyway, so they're just a bit happier. And it was just we didn't plan it, but it ended up working out extremely well in our favor. And so what if a few chickens have a little bump in their breast meat? It doesn't matter.
The other big thing that we learned with our Salatin style shelters, half of the shelter was covered by roofing and half was just covered by chicken wire. And when we started, we thought, oh, great, more sunlight, they'll warm up faster. more airflow, blah, blah, blah.
Nope.
It
Nope.
wasn't a good idea. They rarely left the shaded area in the shelters, and the disturbance would be spread over half the shelter versus the
And it
entire
got
shelter.
really, really, really hot in the summer.
So
really hot.
when we designed these, the entire thing is covered, but they still get plenty of daylight, and they get so much airflow. We have never had an issue since we designed these with any sort of heat stress on our chickens, which is fantastic.
If you
They
want
so animals lose the ability to process grain efficiently when their body temperature reaches a certain point. That's why you're seeing a lot of graziers switch from Black Angus to Red Devon. That's why you're seeing a lot of graziers incorporate trees in their pasture, silvopasture type stuff. It's to keep those animals' body temperature cooler so they can continue gaining weight, which is what you want them to do as a livestock species.
if you want to move on, because we're running out of time a little bit. So this gives you the transition from the top left. You're gonna go clockwise. So we get our chicks in at 2 days old, and we get them every 2 weeks. We get delivery every 2 weeks from mid-March through towards the end of August is when we get our last shipment. And so between 2 and 4 weeks, they're inside the shelter in a brooder where we can control the temperature with heat lamps. And then at 4 weeks, you can see they're feathered. They actually have adult feathers, and they go out to pasture at 4 weeks. From 4 to 10 weeks, they are on pasture, getting moved, fed, and watered every single day. At 10 weeks old, they get put into crates on a Wednesday morning and come back, and we slaughter on the farm. And we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But you can kind of see in the difference between the first picture on the top left and the bottom picture on the bottom right. That's just 10 weeks of growth. Sorry, bottom left, my bad. We do not do Cornish crosses. There is a picture of why. One of the reasons why. Another big reason is they're just not a pasture. They're not bred to be on pasture. They're bred to be rapid weight gain with a 6 to 8 weeks of, and they tend to have really big leg issues, health issues, heart attacks, strokes. I don't want a chicken that's going to walk 2 steps and plop down. That's not what we want. Granted, if we were to do Cornish cross, our profit margin would be better. We just prefer a breed that's going to just be better in the environment we're giving them and allow them to be a chicken. And I wish I could put a video up here. They're just robust. They're healthy animals. We rarely have an issue with them. They run around, they play, they dust bathe, they don't walk a foot and drop. They just are chickens, and it's really a good thing to see. What the breed we raise is a Freedom Ranger. They also go by Red Rangers. A lot of different hatcheries are coming up with different names now. So we get ours out of Freedom Ranger Hatchery in Pennsylvania. But if you want to, you can go on to the next slide if you'd like.
So this is kind of a picture of where we started and where we're at now. We actually started our first processing day I think our first 3 were outside. And we've all seen the videos and the backyard homesteaders doing it, and it was great. But there was a huge demand for pastured poultry in our area, and we saw it, and we were one of the few that were doing it. So we just kept growing and growing each year. And then we eventually the goal was to become state inspected, because Kirsten and I vowed not to ship our birds ever if we can help it, and we've stuck true to that. The reason being is because Buffoni's was the only processor around, and they're 2 hours away, and we didn't really want to stress our animals out right before we killed them with a 2-hour or more truck ride, and however long they're going to sit on the loading dock.
So you can ruin an animal's carcass within the last few minutes of its life and few hours of its life. And because we pride ourselves in our products, we wanted to give the chickens the best possible ending that we could give them, and that required us to stay processing on the farm. Our pigs were a little different. We don't have the infrastructure. We're not set up to do pigs. Fortunately, for us, we build a really good relationship with all of our animals that the pigs trust us. And so when we ship our pigs, to reduce any stress of shipping, we back the trailer in a week and a half or so before we actually ship them. So they end up using that as a shelter. They get used to it. They're comfortable in it. They're not afraid to go in it. And then we drive the 2 hours. And when we drop the ramp, they don't even look at us. It's like we don't exist anymore. And so as hard of a day as it is for us, we know that we're doing the best that we can for our pigs. Our chickens are a little different. We're we're fortunate to have an existing building. We turned, if you look at the picture on the left, that was the old milking room, where the dairy cows would come in, they'd get milked, and then they'd go back out into the barn. So we converted that. We got, I say we, but it was mostly Chris, gutted the entire thing over the course of a winter.
It was a few
Yeah, it
years
was the
process
process.
just because of cash flow. But again, to touch on another grant opportunity, that was a farm transition grant.
Through Connecticut, through the Connecticut Department of Ag. I don't know what they have in another state though.
Yeah. So just to apply some dollar values to it, I think it was a $50,000 cost shared grant.
You want me to go?
How much was it?
It was 50% up to $20,000.
Okay.
So we got $20,000 paid after the project was completed.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it gets confusing. Then they just changed it on us last year, so I don't know what it is now.
Does anybody have any questions about on-farm processing or the pastured poultry side? I know it's a super popular topic.
Yeah, I got a question about the mowing before you bring in the tractors. Do you try to, you said 3 to 6 inches, do you try to mow right down to 3 to 6 or let it kind of pop back up to 3 to 6
Yeah, we
inches
take
after
it
mowing?
down. We take it down pretty low.
Okay.
The other great thing about mowing is we use a brush hog for that field, so it really mulches all that biomass, which helps build our soil. One of the downfalls of farming on multi-generational family farms is we have every disease and every pest and horrible soil structure on this property. So the more little things we can do to build our topsoil layer back up, build that healthy food web in the soils, the better.
Yeah, we have a friend at UConn who's a plant diagnostician, and we tell him every year that they need to just come to our farm for a year and do all the studies they want, because we literally have every pest and disease you can imagine, plus the ones that nobody else has that came up from the south. So,
and even at a small scale, we've done it with a weed whacker in the past, just letting that we've had some pretty nasty drought years.
yeah.
So the taller we can leave the grass, the better. And if we have to, we'll weed whack in front of them, every day. If you're using smaller shelters, it'd be much more feasible.
I like to use the word slow farming. It's really intentional farming. You take your time and you look and you understand your environment. You understand your plants. You watch your animals. You see what they're doing. You pay attention. And sometimes, taking your time will yield better results going forward. We can see when our animals are under stress, and we can do things to mitigate that very quickly. So every day when we go out, we just take our time. We walk our rows in our garden every morning to see what's going on. And every evening we kind of get out there. Every day we go to our animals, we watch them. An animal will tell you when something's wrong. We had one year, a few years ago, and one of our pigs, they just wouldn't settle. And we weren't sure what was going on. They had diarrhea. And we just were like, what the heck? And it was nothing nothing was really going on. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. They weren't under stress that we knew of. And they kept running to go into a new paddock that they hadn't been in yet. And we're like, why? And then we're just like, they need to graze. And so we dropped the intermediary fence for our pigs, and they just ran in there. And within like 24 hours, no more diarrhea, happy pigs. And so if we just, as a community of farmers and growers and animal caretakers, just slowed down. We're in such a fast-paced world all the time. If we just slow down and take our time and become way more connected, I think we can learn a lot more. I mean, we've been doing this for, on paper, 8 years now, but we've been doing this much longer. And so we've learned over time, and that's something that we can share with you guys, is just slow it down. There's time and place for going quickly. But every day we just try to take our time doing 1 or 2 little things, and it makes a huge difference in the long run for our mental health, for animals, and for our crops. If you want to go to the next slide, I know we're running a little bit out of time. So real quick, I can go through this. If you look at the picture on the left, there's 2 different breeds of birds there. You guys could probably tell which one the Cornish cross is versus the one that we raise. For some reason, a few years back, the hatchery sent us 1 Cornish cross hen. We have no idea why, since they don't raise those birds at all. Don't know how it got in there. And that hen was raised to 10 weeks with our other birds. She could barely, and it was more of an experiment on our end. We were monitoring her health and her well-being in case we had to slaughter her early. But she did okay through the 10 weeks. And I mean, you could just see the carcass. It's a double-breasted, it's huge. and little teeny tiny wings and legs. Like it's all in the breast. And so I mean, that's what you get in your grocery store. She could barely, I mean, she could move towards the end, but she had a really hard time. She's getting beat up. And so it's just the carcass on the right is our Freedom Ranger. Look at the leg difference at 10 weeks. You have way more dark meat. You have very uniform breast meat. It's just a night and day difference. And then that's just me after butchering, I don't know, like 30 chickens or something like that. So for our farmers market, we bring mostly cuts. You can definitely, the profit margin's way higher on cuts of meat than they are on whole.
But in some states, you're not legally allowed to sell cuts to the end user unless you're state
Unless you're
inspected.
state or USDA inspected, or have gone and processed or had your birds processed at a USDA facility. So I'm not sure what it is in the other states. Connecticut had a limit of 1,000 birds that you could process on the farm under an exemption. You just had to sell the birds while they were alive. They had to go to end users. You couldn't retail, wholesale, and you couldn't butcher the chicken unless the customer asked for it. So we were operating under that for the last 6 years or more until we got our licensed facility, and now we can sell cuts of meat. We cannot cross state lines though, so we can sell anywhere to whomever within the state of Connecticut. We just can't sell outside of the state of Connecticut.
Is there any more slides?
I don't know. Does anybody have any questions? Oh no, that's a thank you slide.
Cool.
That we actually have fun and we don't work all the time. So actually that's a huge thing. Getting into farming, you want to put your all into it, and it's a great thing. Just remember to take a step back and treat yourself well too. It's really important for your mental health. You know, we have an August burnout every year. If you hadn't heard about it or felt it, you're going to at some point. If you get into farming, you're going to hit a burnout stage and you're going to be like, why the fuck am I doing this? And what are we doing this for? And why am I killing myself? And then it goes away and you're like, oh, because we're actually doing a good thing. And so there's times of the year where we just are like, we need to get off the farm and we need to just go away. And fortunately, we have, you know, being married and being business partners, we have an understanding now, like if Chris has a day, he's just like, I need to go. I'm like, all right, see you later. You know, if I want to go out of state for a weekend or a week, he's like, I can handle this. You know, so it's really important to do and be the best we can, to take time for ourselves first. Because at the end of the day, if we need to be the most important person on our farm, because if we're not and we don't take care of ourselves, then things kind of can go wrong.
It's a real thing. Does anybody have any questions while we're in our last couple minutes?
You have a couple of things. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned really briefly when we were talking about grants about, you mentioned wells. I just haven't found any kind of grants for wells. I've been working with NRCS. Wasn't sure if you knew of an organization that was doing that.
That was through the NRCS.
That was through the NRCS. Okay,
yes,
so they had a program a couple of years ago that I think they haven't renewed. So.
Are you in Connecticut?
No, I'm in Maine.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know how they divvy up funding for things.
Yeah, that was absolutely an NRCS grant though, and it was pretty much paid in full. Again, we paid up front. They kick you the money once the project's complete.
Oh,
But it paid for, I would say, 90% of that project.
when you want to build a well, what is your reason behind it? Because ours, we had to on paper state that it was for perennial plants or shrubs or something.
Okay.
So it's very specific. They just won't give you money for a well. You have to have a reason. So ours was in our growing area when we showed you guys the overhead of our growing space. Ours, we have perennial species in our garden. We have it was kind of weird. And this was one of the grants that we weren't given all the information up front, which is why I mentioned make sure you ask the questions. So we actually got denied through the first round. And then our agent came back and said, oh, well, you didn't add this to the application because we didn't know. And so ask those questions and yeah, but I would check that. I would ask again, and especially if you want to have the well for growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely ask.
Thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
we are running out of time. But that was so informative and it was amazing. Thank you so much to both of you for preparing that and taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us. If anybody has any questions, I'd be willing to take those and maybe forward them to you and stay in touch if we need to. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And we're gonna say goodbye to you two. You're welcome to stay on, but we're going to talk to Land and Sea together. I don't know if you're interested or not listening, but I know you've got a busy schedule too.
We have to go. I gotta do some
Yeah.
garden planning right now.
Yeah, and that being said, if anybody has any questions later on, don't be afraid to email us or call us or
Yeah.
text us or whatever. We're here.
We've done a lot. So if we can't if we don't have an answer, we could probably find one for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
All right. So up next we have Julia Bancroft from Land and Sea Together. Let me see my little intro for you. Julia, thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Julia joined Land and Sea Together in March of 23. Prior to joining the team, she managed the Charleston Land Trust Farmers Market for the past 5 years, which sparked her interest in local food systems in the state. Having the opportunity to connect with farmers, shell fishermen, and fishermen directly, she has seen how daily stress can make an impact upon quality of life at home, at sea, in the fold, or elsewhere on the job. Her focus is to share many resources available to reduce stress in these industries and their families. She's continuing to foster, strengthen, and expand the partnerships of the Land and Sea Together program. And with that, I have your slides. So I will share those and let's see. It just takes me a second.
Remind me how long I have.
You have until 1
Okay.
if you want it. Yep.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to need the full time, but if we get into some discussion and questions, then that'll be great.
Okay.
I have a pretty short, fairly short presentation, and then I wanted to walk through some of the resources on the website, which I think might be helpful.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trisha. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Bancroft. Thank you for that introduction. I'm really excited to be talking to you all today. And from what I understand, not everyone here is a Rhode Island-based farmer. Is that correct? We've got some folks around the New England area mostly. So what our program focuses on are farmers and fishermen, aquaculture folks, and forestry workers in the state of Rhode Island. But towards the end of my presentation, there's other resources for you folks that are not in Rhode Island. So we were started in 2021 through the USDA Farm Ranch Stress Assistance Network bill, which was passed as a response to COVID as a way to help farmers and ranchers just kind of get a little bit more focus on mental health, overall health and wellness for the farming industry, especially in response to COVID and all the pressures that were going on then. So we got the same chunk of money. Every state in the country got the same pot of money. It was $500,000. So it's really great for a state like us that's so small. We're able to make our dollars go a little further than some of those larger states with really big ranches and farms. I feel like we were able to include fishermen in there because of that. You know, we had a lot of funding and a lot of good stuff to do for it. So next slide. So as I mentioned, we provide resources and support for farmers, fishermen, forestry workers, and their families in the state of Rhode Island. And the main way that we do this is by providing free access to an employee assistance program. In other words, we provide some benefits that you would maybe normally get at a corporate job that you obviously don't normally get if you're in a farming or fishing industry. Normally you're working for yourself and you're kind of on your own to figure things out. So through our employee assistance program, it's a 24/7 helpline, and people can call this phone number at any time, any day of the week, any day of the year, and get resources. Anything from if you're trying to get help finding a new daycare for your children, some kind of childcare. If you need help with some business planning, some legal advice, you can get up to, different things. I'll go into more details on the slides, but we felt it was important to have this baseline service that most jobs or people would have access to, that historically farmers and fishermen just haven't had that kind of a resource or support. And I'll mention here, since it's on the slide, we're hosted through the Center for Mediation in Rhode Island. So the Center for Mediation is a Rhode Island-based nonprofit that does different types of mediation cases, private mediation and small claims court mediation services for no cost. So we're hosted by that organization, and that was kind of initiated out of we're the state designated agricultural mediation program. So we have staff that are trained specifically in agricultural mediation, and that's another piece of our program, so we can provide free mediation support. Next slide. Okay, so this just breaks down the program again. So in that first green box, we see the 24/7 helpline. It's a Rhode Island-based employee assistance program. We just had some reduced funding. Our initial pot of that $500,000 that I mentioned from USDA, that initial chunk of money just expired at the end of 2023. So a lot of programs around the country, around the region, the programs are all on hold. Some programs like ours, we've decided to seek out other forms of grants, private grants, that we can keep this program going. So we originally were offering access to 12 free counseling sessions with a mental health professional, and we've had to drop that number down to 3. So a little bit of a hit. We hope to bring that number back up again if we get more funding. But you can see here, there's also direct support in different languages. So if there's folks who are not primary English speakers, they're Spanish, Portuguese, Cape Verde, and a few other languages they can offer direct support with. You can get up to half-hour free consultations with a lawyer, financial services. Like I was saying, even if you want to just kind of turn your nutrition around, you can meet with a nutritionist. There's a lot of really great resources here. So kind of helps get that ball rolling. And then the second bucket of work that we do here, this orange box in the middle, we've worked really hard to create a great network of partners, and this way we can easily connect folks to the right groups. So we know that there's already a lot of really great organizations in the state who are working even maybe more directly with farmers than we do, but we really rely on our partners to help us spread the word of our program and the services we have. And likewise, we're always, helping our partners share the word if there's any kind of webinar or grant opportunity or things like that. So we have regular meetings with our steering committee, which is pretty representative of the partners around the state who are doing this type of work. And we're always just making sure we're on the same page as what's going on in this realm in the state. And then lastly, as I was starting to mention on the last slide, we have our mediation services, and we also provide technical assistance with farm succession, transition planning, and educational resources. So right now we have a grant where one of our staff is working directly with 3 farms in the state to put together farm succession plans. So transitioning on to either family members or folks who are not family members. And we're able to facilitate those conversations. They have the training to walk you through that process, making sure you're thinking about things that you might not be thinking of, and just basically making sure everyone's on the same page with that process. So it's not always the funnest conversation to have, but it is a really important one, especially if something unexpected happens. Just having a plan in place for an emergency or just an unexpected is really crucial. Same thing with the mediation. So we can mediate if there's any kind of dispute between a neighbor, if it's between someone that you're leasing land from, you know, sometimes we get into that where it's a lease disagreement. There might not be anything on paper and it's just leading to a big conflict. So we come in as a neutral person, or neutral party. We help facilitate that conversation and basically see if the folks can come to some kind of compromise or an agreement to get them past that point of conflict. Yeah, so those are some of the other resources that we provide. And as I mentioned, that those are all free resources. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a shout out to our partners. So over the last 2, now going on 3 years, we've worked really closely with a lot of great organizations in the state across the different realms of farming and fishing, and shellfishing as well. So this is just a list of some of those folks you maybe have heard of or maybe have worked with in the past. We just did a winter webinar series with Land for Good and the Legal Food, sorry, not the Legal Food Hub, Land for Good and Farm Commons, which have really great offerings and resources. So we talked about building an LLC, how to secure farmland access. Those are some of the topics that we covered. So we do try to offer these free virtual trainings to folks just to kind of cover some of these topics. And I have recordings available if anyone is ever interested. Next slide. So this breaks down the employee assistance program a little bit more in detail. I've kind of covered it a few times, but the 3 free sessions with a mental health treatment provider, immediate assistance with a trained professional staff. When you call the phone number, you usually get connected with a person and then they connect you with basically a case manager who will help you navigate whatever thing that you're calling about, whatever stressor it is. So if it is a mental health thing, they'll make sure they put you in touch with the provider and they'll be the one who's following up with you, seeing, you know, how has that been working out? Do you think that's helping? Is it improving? Is there any other resources you need? So they do have that person who basically gets assigned to you, and it is confidential. They'll probably ask you they do ask you some kind of intake questions, but we never see any of that data. The only data that we see from this coastline is the number of people who are calling and accessing the services and what categories of stress they're calling about. So is it financial stress? Is it family stress? You know, is it legal or financial stress? So we do keep track of some of that data just so we could basically keep proving that this is a needed and used resource and people are actually accessing it and finding it useful. So we never find out who calls, you know, who's getting help for what. Like we never see any of that. So it is confidential, which is great. Yeah, different languages provided and 24/7, 365 days a year. And I always try to reiterate that you know, maybe it's not the individual farmer or fisherman themselves, but it could be a family member. So even if it's, you know, an aunt or an uncle who live out of state, something like that, they can still call because they're tied to that farmer who's based in Rhode Island. So we know that this is, you know, it can be a really stressful industry to be in, especially if you're starting out. And it really does take a village of support. So, you know, any way we can really help broaden that reach of who's able to get these resources, we thought it was really important to include family members into that as well, especially getting into, you know, spouses, whether they're directly involved in the business or not, or children, you know, those can just be really, they can kind of carry the burden of the stress day to day. So we wanted to be able to open up these services to them as well. Next slide. All right, so we do have some criteria on who's covered for these services, who's eligible. I have a list here, it's copied from our website, and I can show you, we have these documents on our website of, who's eligible and who might not be, but it's pretty broad. So in the agriculture realm, which I think everyone on the call is, here is the, farmers and their families. So if you're doing livestock, fruit or vegetable, flour, hay, turf, orchards, seed farms, grain farms, I mean, it's really broad. Farm workers. So if you aren't, if you're a farm hand or a staff in some way, that's a person who's also eligible. Urban farmers, historically marginalized communities, gardeners, people like that and their families, those are covered. Right now we're still covering nonprofit groups who are service providers. So like folks at Farm Fresh Rhode Island or Rhode Island Food Policy Council, some of those groups who are directly involved in impacting kind of this realm of farmers. So they are also covered. And then nurseries, staff and families, and farm home food manufacturers. So the entity has to be based in Rhode Island. That's kind of one of the biggest criteria. The bottom of my slide got cut off, but that's okay. I kind of covered most of that. As I mentioned, we may or may not, depending on our reduced funding, we might be slightly altering the eligibility, but for the most part, the bulk of folks who fit into that farmer, direct farmer, farm worker, urban farmers, like those people for sure will always be covered. Next slide. So as I mentioned, if you're based in Rhode Island, you're eligible, and so is your family. As I also mentioned, they don't necessarily have to be in Rhode Island, but if they're tied to you being based in Rhode Island, then that's great. So we have our 24/7 helpline here that's available to access. And, I thought it was a really great segue from the last presentation mentioning at the end that, it is really important to find that work-life balance, and it can feel really all-consuming. And, it's really a systematic culture of like working yourself to the bone, going all out. And I think it's, this is a great program that we have for helping manage or reduce some of that stress. But from a lot of conversations we've been having, we're finding it's really important to kind of break down some of the stigma of, especially in these industries, of not reaching out for help or just kind of going at it alone. So we're really trying to make it a little bit more of a system change. And how do we create more of a sustainable culture in farming and fishing industries so people aren't hitting this burnout? And whether it's physical burnout, mental burnout, I think it's really important to find that balance, and that could easier said than done. Next slide. Okay, so this is relevant to some of you folks on the call. So if you're not in Rhode Island and you're thinking, wow, these resources sound really awesome, I could really use some of this, or I know someone who could use this, we have a few different resources here. So there's the Farm Aid hotline, 1-800-FARM-AID. There's also the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And then I was looking at a few earlier today. So as I mentioned, that initial pot of funding that every state got was through this FRSAN, Farm Ranch Stress Assistance Network. So if you're based in Connecticut, you can type in Connecticut FRSAN and it'll bring you to the webpage of that program. Maine, some of these groups are based out of university cooperative extensions. Some are based out of the state Department of Agriculture divisions. So every state is really different, but most states in New England have a website that has at least some information on what that state program did, if they have more funding, if they're kind of on hold waiting for more funding. And there's a contact person there. So if you wanted to reach out to them in your state, I know Maine is through the Maine, University of Maine Cooperative Extension. They have a website, they have a contact. They pretty much state, you know, we don't have funding right now, but if you're needing some kind of assistance, reach out to us and they'll do the best they can to navigate you through that. Tied to that funding, it's pretty much all tied up in the Farm Bill right now. And as we know, it's really up in the air of what's going to happen with the Farm Bill. So, you know, if it were to pass, chances are some of these states might get the funding again. It might go more to like regional efforts instead of individual states. So it's all very up in the air, which is why we made a lot of progress in a short amount of time, and we wanted to keep that momentum going. And we did a needs assessment where we surveyed farmers and fishermen in the state that basically proved that there is a need for this type of service and this type of support for these industries. So for us, we felt it was important to keep the program rolling, keep applying for grants. You know, it's a lot more of an administrative lift, but for us, it's really worth it because we're hearing and connecting with folks on, you know, a weekly basis, just letting us know how much of a difference having this kind of support was to them. Next slide. Okay, so some data and facts, as I mentioned, we do get certain data from the Employee Assistance Program. So we launched in July 2022. And since then to date, we've had over 60 farm, fishermen, forestry, that's what FFF stands for us, workers or family members call the helpline, and totaling over 300 hours of professional support, whether it was from the mental health therapist, or if it was just from a case manager helping them navigate some other stressor burdens going on. So I just have a few quotes here of a farmer that really found the service to be super useful. So it's important for us to keep track of the numbers, really, and nothing else. Just kind of what the stressor is, how many hours of help they're receiving, and how many people and what industries they're calling from. I will say we tend to have more engagement with the farming community here in Rhode Island. The fishing and aquaculture communities, we're still kind of navigating our way through making connections there and getting the word out. And forestry is a very small industry here in this state, but we have, you know, there are some folks who are still involved in that industry that we're still trying to make connections with and share the resources with. Next slide. Oh, did that picture not load? I think I had a picture on this slide. No? Okay. I don't know why that one didn't load. This last slide, sorry that the image isn't there. It was just a plug for our farm succession opportunity. So as I mentioned, we have a grant and we're already working with 3 farmers in the state on farm succession plans. But we also have been written into an American Farmland Trust Land Navigator grant where it's funding our work to continue farm succession and transition planning for farmers. So that means us going around working directly with farmers who are in need of this kind of support, whether they're just starting out. And one of the things that we always say is it's really never too early to have this kind of a conversation, whether it's with your family or business partner, whoever you're getting involved in the enterprise with. So there's really never a wrong time to do it, but sometimes you can almost wait too late to start thinking about farm succession and things just get really complicated. So we do have that service available. So if there's anyone who's thinking about learning more about farm succession, transition, things maybe to start thinking about as you get involved kind of down the line, things you might just want to keep in the back of your head. We have the funding available to work with folks directly and just kind of help them navigate that process. And there's a lot of really great other organizations who do this type of work, like the Carrot Project and Land for Good. So a lot of times too, we can do a certain part of the process and then other organizations we might almost pass it off to, and they can They specialize in other parts of the process. Like we're kind of good at helping start the process of farm succession, getting those early conversations going, the mediation between, you know, who the successor might be. And then, you know, Carrot Project and Land for Good might focus a little bit better on kind of that end piece of the process of like finalizing documents and getting things into writing and all of that. So it is, you know, we have this grant to do this work, and we are really good at, you know, doing this service, but it is, again, it's almost that partnership effort. Like it really takes a lot of people to make it a really effective process. So we do work with other groups too. Next slide. And that's all I've got. So yeah, we're here to help. If you have any questions about the program, I'm happy to take questions now. And then I did want to share my screen and just walk through a few things, but I'll take a pause here to see if anyone had any questions right off the bat.
Julia, could you put your contact information, the best way to get a hold of you, into the chat so everyone has a link right now? That'd be great. I also wanted to mention while you're doing that, that FRSAN, all of the links for all of the states, I believe for everybody who registered for the program, are on Brightspace in the human risk tab. So that information is there for you. And then that was it for me. Any other questions?
Awesome. So am I going to be able to share my screen?
I think so.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so I'll just walk you guys through this. This is our website, landandseatogether.org. We have, this is, again, you can see pretty easy to access the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and the 24/7 helpline that we have. As I mentioned, we do have these eligibility forms. So under the Who We Help page, if you're trying to see, you know, who's covered, it opens up. Are you guys able to see all of this? I never know when I share my screen. Okay. So it shows who is eligible. Again, I had it on that one slide, but if there's something you're not sure about, if you're covered or not, everyone in this program, from what I understand right now, is eligible. So we have that. We have these other resource guides here that we're working on updating right now. So it's just kind of a compiled document of different topics. So mental health and well-being, different grants or loans that might be relevant to you, different information on land access, succession planning, legal and tax help. So these are pretty robust resource guides, and we have found a lot of folks have been using these. So, you know, it might be worth taking a scroll through, and I can drop this in the chat as well. But there's some really great information on the loan programs, other groups that are doing work in the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities. So there's a lot of great resources and information here. Veteran farmers, we've got some links there. We can definitely update that as well. Like I said, we haven't updated these in a little while, so we know they might be slightly out of date, but there's still really good stuff there. All right, and then here, I'm going to show you the Coastline, so you guys can all still see this, right? Coastline website, okay. So the other option, we have that 24/7 helpline, but another piece of that service is also a website. So maybe you don't want to call and talk to somebody, and you want to just, like, let me just see what I can figure out on my own. Maybe it's a little bit more simple of a thing than getting really involved, and maybe you just don't like talking to people on the phone. I totally get that. So what you would do, and I can send I'll send this to Trisha to share out with you guys, but you can hit login, and the company username over here is LAST, Land and Sea Together. And then you can hit sign in. And then here, you know, here's featured this month, painless estate planning. So there's a webinar, there's resources, there's tips. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. You can do a self-assessment on if you're feeling, you know, like you're not sure what's going on, if there's a crisis going on, whether it's, you know, directly related to you or someone in your life. There's been a loss, emotional well-being, elder care, parenting. I mean, there's just really great resources here. If you're looking for healthy recipes, mindfulness, meditation, legal, financial. So when you click on each section, it gives you a little drop down. You know, so this, you know, taxes, right? It's tax season. So click on income tax, see what happens. There's a calculator, there's federal tax forms, estate planning. And I mean, it really breaks it down. So there's a ton of resources here. There's articles, there's different like quiz assessments, there's calculators, you know, if you have payroll you're trying to deal with, or, you know, 1099s, things like that. There's frequently asked questions. So I always, you know, we focus a lot on the helpline, which is really great. But I think sometimes too, we forget that there's just really awesome resources here. Parenting, I mean, like just checklists of, you know, a guide to choosing childcare, how to prepare a babysitter. Maybe it's your first time navigating this realm of things. You know, finding school, like after school programs or navigating preschool, all of that stuff. Again, there's the folks on the helpline would help you answer a lot of the same stuff too. But, you know, maybe you start reading some articles and doing some digging as well. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's I don't want to say it's underutilized, but I think sometimes we almost forget to mention all of the possibilities of tools on the website as well. And that's that page. So for example, I know some of the farmers here from Connecticut. So Connecticut Department of Ag, this is their website. And Trisha, you said you have the links to the state FRSAN programs. So, you know, it gives a little rundown of what the grant award did and where it's at. There's contact information, so you can always reach out to them and ask, you know, where they're at in their process of things and if they think they're going to be getting more money and offering more services or anything like that. So I encourage you guys to definitely reach out because it's really a great program designed to help reduce stress in, you know, in really a lot of ways. And it's worth it to just kind of keep up with these groups and see where they're at with things. Are they going to continue on? And, you know, maybe there's other resources they could help connect you with. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. That's all I have. I didn't want to take up too much time. I know you guys are covering a lot of stuff, but
That was great.
yeah. I'll also mention one other piece of our program that a lot of folks are familiar with or at least have heard of. We did offer a micro grant program for 2 years. So folks, farmers, fishermen, aquaculture folks, you could apply for these micro grants. Last year it was $500. This year we did it slightly differently and it was $250, but these were direct support chunks of money. So the initial round of micro grants we designed to, and again, we're limited in our funding because it's federal money. So there's restraints on what we could and couldn't pay for, but we were able to cover costs such as childcare, gym memberships, you know, equipment repair, like if it was a farm truck repair or boat repair, things like that. So we were able to basically give that $500 directly to the provider. And then the individual farmer had that credit basically on hand. So this past year when we did it, we lowered the amount to $250. And that was, we were promoting our Stronger Together training program. So it's a suicide prevention virtual training that I will also send the link to because folks can take this training at any time. Only takes about an hour and a half, and it kind of covers that first aid, mental health first aid of how to look out for your counterparts when you're out there in the field. You know, noticing if someone's starting to have a drastic change in the way they're even, you know, are they neglecting their animals? Is something going on? Are they acting different? So it's a training that we worked with a group to tailor specifically towards the agriculture community. There's another version that's just more broad and general. So we have that available. And what we did in the fall was if folks took the training and completed it and sent in their completion certificate, we were able to we sent them directly a $250 check. So that is a piece of our program that, again, we've heard is obviously the most impactful because it's direct support that'll go immediately towards just taking something off your plate, like paying for childcare or paying for, like a summer camp for the kids or something like that. And we want to continue that program. And right now we're in the process of figuring out our grant funding and seeing where we have some wiggle room to bring that program back and other grants we can apply for that would allow us to maybe have less restricted funding where we could pay. We always are hearing, people want help paying for co-pays or even utilities, like heating bills are so expensive now and electricity. So trying to see if there's ways that we can also offer that support and getting a little bit less restrictions on how and what we pay for. But I just wanted to also mention that piece of our program as well.
Okay, do we have any questions for Julia? I just want to say I took that training. It was great. It actually mirrors, we do like suicide prevention training in the military. So it was kind of similar to that, what signs to look out for and what next steps you can take. So I do recommend that. And I also wanted to mention, you mentioned the Carrot Project and you mentioned Land for Good, both of which are on our docket for future speakers. So you'll be able to connect with those resources too. And I think that's it. There's no questions, then I think we're just going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you guys so much. Best of luck in the rest of the training. I'm so glad to see something like this being offered, especially to veterans. I think this is so great. So thank you, Trisha, for doing this work. And I'm excited to see where the group heads after this. Yeah. And feel free to reach out to me. I dropped my email and my cell in the website or in the chat here, and then the website with those resources you can all access.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Great. So I just have one last slide, basically. Does anyone have any questions? Not for Julia, for me? No? Okay. All right, we did it. First class in the books. Yay. If you've already done so, if you haven't already done so, please complete the pre-course survey. I just took a look. It looks like 18 people have taken it so far. So that's pretty much everybody that's in the class today, I'm assuming. So thank you very much. There is a homework assignment due for next week. It is to review the risk management guide. It's on Brightspace and it was also sent to you. And then there's a little block where you can just enter in a couple sentences about a lesson that you learned from reviewing the guide. And then our next class next week is 9 to 1, the same. And it's going to be with Colonel Ann Martin. She is the one that was directing Boots to Bushels at UMaine. And she's going to be going over business planning. So vision, mission, objective, strategy, action plan. So you can also keep in mind, what you envision for your farm venture. Come to class with that information so that you can apply it to what she's talking about. Thank you so much for being here and for being patient with me as I figure out the Zoom idiosyncrasies. And I look forward to working with you all next week and in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Tricia.
Hey,
Hey, I'll just message you. I'll get you that information. And then let me know going forward if you need help with this. Just let me know. Okay.
okay, great. Thank you so much, David. Bye, Josh.